I never imagined my own daughter would point at me from my front yard and say, "She has no right to this land." My son-in-law stood beside her holding a folder of documents, while my younger brother nodded as if I were a stranger trying to steal someone else's property. They believed they were about to take everything my late husband and I had spent 40 years building. But none of us expected what the county land registry would uncover. The moment an old file was opened, every voice in the room disappeared, and the truth changed every one of our lives forever. If this story touches your heart, I'd love for you to stay with me until the end. Please, like this video, subscribe if you enjoy heartfelt family stories, and tell me in the comments. What would you do if your own family challenged your right to your home? And before you go, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. 2 years after my husband William Wallace passed away, the house became quieter than I ever thought a house could be. It sat at the end of a narrow county road outside a small town in Georgia, where the mornings smelled like damp grass pine trees and coffee left too long on the stove. William and I had lived there for more than 40 years. We raised our daughter there. We buried 3 old dogs beneath the oak tree near the back fence. We planted pecan trees that took so long to bear fruit, I used to joke they were waiting for us to become old enough to deserve them. After William died, people told me the same thing over and over. "Sharon, you ought to sell. Sharon, that land is too much for one woman. Sharon, you don't need all that space." But they didn't understand. That land was not just space. It was memory. It was the sound of William's boots crossing the porch before sunrise. It was the garden where he used to kneel beside me pretending he knew more about tomatoes than I did. It was the patch of earth behind the barn where he once told me, "As long as you have this place, Sharon, you'll never have to beg anybody for shelter." So I stayed. Every morning, I walked the property line slowly, not because I had to, but because it made me feel close to him. I checked the fence posts. I fed the birds. I pulled weeds from the flower beds. Sometimes my knees ached so badly, I had to sit on the back steps until the pain passed, but I never once thought of giving up the land. At 68 years old, I still knew every inch of it better than anyone alive. At least I thought I did. My daughter, Emily Carter, used to visit every Saturday. She would bring groceries, sit at my kitchen table, and talk about her job at the elementary school office. She had always been a tender-hearted girl, growing up the kind who cried when a bird hit the window. After William died, she held my hand through the funeral and slept on my sofa for 3 nights because she didn't want me waking up alone. For a while, I believed grief had made us closer. Then her husband Jason started coming with her. Jason Carter had always been polite in the way a salesman is polite. Smooth voice, clean shirt, smile ready before the door even opened. He worked in real estate, mostly small commercial properties and investment lots around the county. William never fully trusted him, though he never said so in front of Emily. One evening, years earlier, after Jason had left our house, William looked out the window and said, "That man studies a room before he enters it." I laughed and asked, "What does that mean?" William only said it means he counts what people have before he asks how they are. Back then, I thought my husband was being too harsh. After he died, I began to understand. At first, Jason's questions seemed harmless. "Sharon, how many acres do you have here again? Did William ever get the back parcel surveyed? You know, land values have been climbing out this way, right?" I would answer simply because I had no reason not to. "About 18 acres altogether." "Yes, surveyed years ago." "No, I don't keep up with prices." "I'm not selling." Whenever I said that last part, Jason would smile, but his eyes would go flat for half a second. "Of course," he would say, "nobody's pressuring you, but pressure can arrive without raising its voice." It came in small remarks. Emily would glance at the tall grass near the far fence and say, "Mom, this is a lot for you to manage." Jason would stand on the porch looking over the back field and say, "You know, unused land still costs money." Emily would open my refrigerator and sigh, "You shouldn't be out here alone all the time." I tried to hear love in their words. A mother always tries to hear love first, even when disrespect is standing right in front of her wearing concern like a Sunday dress. Then my younger brother, Daniel Wallace, started showing up. Daniel was 65, 3 years younger than me, though he acted like age had somehow given him authority over my life. He had not been close to me for years, not because of one big fight, but because some people drift away when they no longer need anything from you. Daniel had always been charming when he wanted something. He could make a bank teller laugh, a waitress forgive a rude comment, and a church elder believe he had only missed service because of back pain. William used to help him from time to time, though he never told me how much. When I asked, William would only say, "Family can be expensive, Sharon." After William's funeral, Daniel cried into a handkerchief and promised he would check on me. He did not come back for nearly 8 months. Then suddenly, he began stopping by twice a week. He would bring a bag of peaches or a carton of eggs, sit at the kitchen table, and look around the house as if seeing it with new eyes. "This place has held up well," he said one Tuesday afternoon. "It has," I answered. "William was smart to keep it. He loved this land." Daniel nodded slowly. "Land like this doesn't come along every day." There it was again. Land, value, ownership. Not memories, not home. I began noticing how often the conversation circled back to the property, like a buzzard circling something not dead yet but expected to be soon. Emily asked where I kept my important papers. Jason asked whether William had a will. Daniel asked if the land had ever been divided between family members. Each question by itself could have been innocent. Together, they made something cold settle in my stomach. One Saturday, Emily came over without calling first. She found me in the garden, kneeling beside the collard greens with dirt under my fingernails. "Mom, she said you shouldn't be doing that by yourself." I smiled up at her. "I've been doing this since before you were born." "That's not the point." Her tone was sharper than usual. I pushed myself up, carefully brushing soil from my knees. "What is the point, Emily?" She crossed her arms. Behind her, Jason stood near the driveway talking on his phone and looking toward the back field. "The point is, you're almost 70, she said, "and this property is too much responsibility." I stared at her for a moment, waiting for my daughter to soften. She didn't. "I pay the taxes," I said. "I keep the house. I manage fine, for now." Those 2 words hurt more than I expected, for now. As if I were a temporary obstacle, as if time itself had already sided with them. Jason ended his call and walked toward us with that polished smile. "Sharon," he said, "nobody is questioning your independence." I looked at him. "It sounds exactly like you are." He lifted both hands, pretending innocence. "We're just trying to be practical. This land could secure Emily's future. Your grandchildren's future if they ever have children. It doesn't make sense for one person to sit on something this valuable without a plan." I felt my face grow warm. "William and I had a plan," I said. "The plan was for me to live here." Jason's smile tightened. "Plans change." I turned to Emily. "Is that what you think too?" She looked away. That was the first moment I truly felt afraid, not of losing the land yet, but of losing the daughter I thought I knew. After they left that day, I sat alone on the porch until the sun dropped behind the pines. The fields glowed gold, and the house behind me seemed to breathe with old memories. I could almost hear William's voice telling me not to ignore what was right in front of my eyes. A week later, I found the first clue that this was more than family concern. I was at Miller's grocery picking up flour and coffee when Margaret Hayes stopped me near the canned goods. Margaret had lived across the road from us since before Emily was born. She was 81, sharp as a sewing needle, and knew more county gossip than the local newspaper. "Sharon," she said quietly, "has your son-in-law been helping you sell land?" I frowned. "No, why would you ask that?" Margaret looked uncomfortable. "Because I saw him last Thursday near your back fence with 2 men in dress shoes. They were pointing toward your field." The grocery aisle seemed to tilt. "Are you sure it was Jason Honey? I know a man in polished loafers when I see one, and I know your son-in-law." I thanked her, paid for my groceries, and drove home with both hands gripping the steering wheel. That night, I called Emily. "Was Jason out here last Thursday?" There was silence. "Emily, he might have driven by," she said. "With 2 men." Another silence. Then she sighed. "Mom, don't make this dramatic." My heart sank. "I'm not making anything dramatic. I'm asking why your husband is showing my land to strangers." "It's family land," she said. The words landed like a slap. "My land," I corrected. She didn't answer. When we hung up, I stood in my kitchen staring at the phone. Outside, the dark fields stretched behind the house, quiet and patient. For the house quiet and patient. For the first time since William died, I walked to the back door and locked it. The next morning, Daniel called. "Sharon," he said, too cheerful, "maybe we all need to sit down and talk about what's fair." What's fair? First time since William died? I walked to the back door and locked it. The next morning, Daniel called. "Sharon," he said, too cheerful, "maybe we all need to sit down and talk about what's fair." "What's fair?" I asked. "You know, with the property." Emily has a point. William wouldn't have wanted conflict. I closed my eyes. Using a dead man's name to push a living woman is one of the cruelest tricks family can play. "Daniel," I said, "William wanted me protected." He paused. Protected from what? I looked out toward the land my husband had loved, the land everyone suddenly seemed hungry for. "Maybe from this," I said. Daniel's voice hardened just enough for me to hear the truth underneath. "You need to be careful, Sharon. Sometimes old paperwork isn't as clear as people think." After he hung up, I stood perfectly still. Old paperwork. That was not something a brother said by accident. That was something a brother said when he had already been talking to someone else. By the end of that week, I understood 3 things. Emily was no longer only worried about me. Jason was not only curious about the land. And Daniel had come back into my life for a reason that had nothing to do with love. But what I did not know yet was that their plan had started months before they ever sat at my kitchen table. Jason had already spoken to a real estate investor. He had already described my property as an opportunity. And somewhere behind closed doors, my family had begun discussing my home as if I were already gone. That Sunday, I cooked as if nothing in my life had changed. I seasoned the chicken the way William liked it, with paprika, garlic powder, black pepper, and just enough cayenne to make your lips remember supper after it was over. I made collard greens with smoked turkey cornbread in the old cast-iron skillet and a peach cobbler because Emily had loved it since she was a child. Part of me knew something was coming, but another part of me still believed food could soften people. A woman my age can know better and still hope anyway. Emily arrived at 5 o'clock sharp, with Jason walking behind her. Daniel came 10 minutes later, wearing a pressed blue shirt and the kind of smile he used when he wanted people to think he had brought peace instead of trouble. I noticed right away that nobody complimented the food. Jason placed a brown leather folder beside his plate. Emily barely looked at me. Daniel kept clearing his throat. I stood at the stove, spooning gravy into a bowl, and told myself not to shake. Everything smells good, Mom, Emily finally said, but her voice sounded far away. Then eat while it's hot, I said. We sat at the kitchen table where William used to sit, at the head, his chair still empty, because I had never had the heart to move it. Jason took the seat beside Emily. Daniel sat across from me, and that folder sat on the table like a fifth guest. For 15 minutes, we pretended to be a family. Daniel talked about the weather. Emily asked if I had gone to church that morning. Jason mentioned a new grocery store opening near the highway. But every conversation ended quickly falling flat between us. I could hear forks tapping plates. I could hear the refrigerator humming. I could hear my own heart moving faster than it should have. Finally, Jason wiped his mouth with a napkin and placed both hands on the folder. "Sharon," he said, "we need to have a practical conversation." There it was. I looked at Emily first, hoping she might stop him. She lowered her eyes. "What kind of conversation?" I asked. Jason opened the folder and took out several sheets of paper. They were neatly clipped together with yellow tabs attached to the sides. I recognized the format immediately, not because I understood the documents, but because William had always kept important things clean flat and labeled. Jason had copied that habit without earning the trust behind it. "It's about the property," he said. I put my fork down. Daniel leaned back in his chair. "Now, Sharon, don't get upset before you hear him out." I turned to my brother. "That depends on what he says." Jason slid the papers toward me. "This is just a proposed family property agreement." "Proposed by whom?" "By all of us," Emily said quietly. "All of you," I repeated. She swallowed. "Mom, please don't make this sound ugly. It became ugly the moment you brought papers to my dinner table without telling me." Jason's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice smooth. "No one is trying to disrespect you. We're trying to avoid problems later." "What problems?" He tapped one page with his finger. "The land is too valuable to be handled informally. There should be shared decision-making. Emily is your only child. Daniel is William's brother-in-law by family connection and has history with this property too." I stared at him. Daniel is my brother. He is not William's brother-in-law by land rights, blood rights, or any other rights. Daniel's face reddened. "I helped William with that place plenty of times. You helped him fix a fence twice and borrowed his chainsaw for 6 years. Emily flinched, but Daniel's eyes hardened. Jason pushed forward. "The point is, Sharon, this land has always functioned as family land." "No," I said. "It has functioned as my home." Emily's head snapped up. "Mom, nobody is saying it isn't your home." "That is exactly what this paper says." I picked up the first page. My hands were steadier than I expected. The document was full of polished words, but I understood enough. Shared authority, future sale consideration, family benefit, majority approval, transfer planning. I read one sentence twice before my stomach turned cold. "You want me to agree that any sale or development of the land can be approved by a majority of family stakeholders?" Jason said. "That's standard." I looked around the table. "And who are the stakeholders?" Emily whispered. "Me, Jason, Uncle Daniel, and you." I laughed once, but it had no humor in it. "So the three of you could outvote me on my own land." Jason leaned forward. "That is not how we want to frame it, but that is how you wrote it." "Because emotions can cloud judgment," he said. "We're trying to protect the asset." "The asset?" I said. The word burned. Not home, not family place, not my shelter. Asset. I looked at Emily. "Is that what your father's work was to you? An asset?" Her eyes filled, but she did not back down. "Daddy would have wanted me protected too. Your father protected you his whole life, and now you're acting like I have no future claim to anything." I sat back slowly. There are moments when your child says something and you can almost hear a door closing inside them. Not because they hate you. Hatred would be easier to understand. But because they have chosen a story where you are the obstacle and they are the victim. Emily, I said you are my daughter. When I die, whatever is mine will be handled properly. But I am not dead. The room went silent. Daniel looked down at his plate. Jason stared at me like I had embarrassed him. Emily wiped one tear from her cheek. That is cruel. No, I said softly. Cruel is sitting in my kitchen, eating my food, and asking me to sign away control of the place where I sleep. Jason exhaled sharply. No one is asking you to sign away control. I held up the document. Then you didn't read your own paper. His smoothness cracked then. Just a little. Sharon, you're not a lawyer. No, but I'm not a fool either. Daniel finally spoke. Sometimes people don't realize what's best for them when pride gets involved. I turned to him. And what do you get out of this, Daniel? He blinked. Excuse me. You heard me. I'm trying to keep peace. You came here after 8 months of silence to keep peace. His mouth tightened. Jason jumped in before Daniel could answer. This is exactly why we need structure. Accusations don't help. I stared at Daniel. Did William owe you something? Daniel's face changed so quickly I almost missed it. His eyes flickered toward Jason, then back to me. No, he said, but the word arrived too fast. Emily frowned. Uncle Daniel? Daniel picked up his glass of tea and drank, though I could see his hand trembling. I felt something open inside my memory. Old conversations. William at the kitchen desk late at night. A checkbook closing when I entered the room. Daniel showing up years ago with a sad story about a failed business deal. William saying I handled it when I asked why Daniel looked ashamed. Daniel, I said slowly, did you borrow money from William? Jason looked annoyed. That has nothing to do with this. I turned to him. Then why are you answering? Emily stared at her uncle. Did you, Daniel, set his glass down? Families help each other. How much, I asked. He looked away. How much, Daniel? He rubbed his forehead. It was a long time ago. That answer told me more than a number would have. I pushed the papers back across the table. So, this is what tonight is. Jason wants land. Emily wants security. And Daniel wants old debts buried under new paperwork. Daniel stood so abruptly, his chair scraped the floor. That is unfair, Sharon. Unfair, I said. You let them bring legal papers into my house and ask me to make you a stakeholder in property you never paid for. Jason stood too. Enough. This conversation is becoming emotional. It should be emotional, I said. You are trying to take a widow's home. Emily stood crying now. Mom, stop saying it like that. How else should I say it? She placed both palms on the table. Say that you don't trust me. Say that you think I'm greedy. Say that you care more about dirt than your own daughter. The words hit me harder than anything Jason had said. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment, I saw the little girl who used to run barefoot through the garden, her hair flying behind her, calling for me to watch her catch fireflies. I wondered when that child had learned to speak to me like an opponent. I care enough about you, I said, not to let you become someone you'll be ashamed of later. Her tears stopped. Jason scoffed. That's manipulative. I pointed toward the folder. Take those papers out of my house, Sharon Daniel warned. Now. Nobody moved, so I stood, gathered every page, every copy, every yellow-tabbed insult, and pressed the folder against Jason's chest. You will not bring this to my table again. Jason took the folder slowly. His face had gone pale with anger. You may regret refusing to cooperate, he said. That was the two cooperate, he said. That was the first clear threat. Emily whispered Jason, but he did not look at her. He looked at me. There are questions about the original ownership, he said. Questions William may not have wanted you to face. First clear threat. Emily whispered, Jason? But he did not look at her. He looked at me. There are questions about the original ownership, he said. Questions William may not have wanted you to face. The kitchen seemed to go still. What does that mean? I asked. Daniel closed his eyes, as if Jason had said too much. Jason noticed and immediately softened his voice. It means paperwork from 40 years ago can be complicated. That's all. No, I said. That is not all. Emily grabbed her purse. We should go. Jason noticed and immediately softened his voice. It means paperwork from 40 years ago can be complicated. That's all. No, I said. That is not all. Emily grabbed her purse. We should go. Daniel stepped toward the door, but I stopped him with my voice. Daniel. He turned. How much did you owe my husband? His face twisted with shame and resentment. William helped me when nobody else would. That isn't an answer. No, he said bitterly. It isn't. Then he walked out. Emily followed him crying. Jason was the last to leave. At the doorway, he looked back into my kitchen and smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You should review the records, Sharon, he said, before someone else does. The door closed behind him. I stood alone beside the table, surrounded by cooling food and the empty chair where William should have been. The house was silent except for the ticking clock above the stove. For the first time, I wondered if my husband had taken secrets to his grave. And for the first time, I understood that my family had not come to ask. They had come to prepare me for a fight. The first letter arrived 3 days after that Sunday dinner. It came in a cream-colored envelope, the kind that looked too expensive for ordinary mail. My name was typed neatly across the front, Mrs. Sharon Wallace. No handwritten return address. Just a company name, printed in small black letters in the corner. Harrison Creek Development Group. I stood at my kitchen counter for a long moment before opening it. Something about that envelope made my stomach tighten. It felt official without being friendly, polite, without being innocent. Inside was a letter from a man named Brent Lawson, Acquisitions Director. He wrote that his company was exploring selective development opportunities in the county and had identified my property as strategically valuable. He said they would be interested in discussing a purchase offer well above current market value. I read that phrase 3 times. Well above current market value. Then I turned the page and saw the number. For a moment, I had to sit down. It was more money than William and I had ever seen in one place. More than our house had been valued at during the last tax assessment. More than enough to make a person understand why hungry people had suddenly started smiling at her porch. But after the shock came something colder. How did they know my land was not listed for sale? I had not contacted any agent. I had not asked for an appraisal. I had not so much as mentioned selling to anyone outside my family. Yet here was a development company writing to me as if my property had already entered a conversation I had not been invited to. I folded the letter carefully and placed it on the table. Then I locked the back door again. The second letter came 2 days later. This one was more direct. It mentioned road access acreage zoning possibilities and the natural privacy of the back field. It even referred to the creek line along the far edge of the property, a detail you could not know unless you had walked the land or studied a survey. My hands turned cold around the paper. William used to say, a stranger who knows too much about your business was usually helped by someone close enough to hear it. I carried the letter to the window, and looked out across the yard. The grass moved gently in the wind. The barn leaned slightly to the left the way it had for 20 years. The pecan trees stood quiet and patient. Everything looked the same. Nothing felt the same. That afternoon, I called the number on the letter. A woman with a bright, professional voice answered. "Harrison Creek Development Group, this is Monica." I said, "This is Sharon Wallace. I received a letter about my property." "Oh, yes, Mrs. Wallace," she said immediately, too quickly. "Mr. Lawson has been hoping to speak with you." That made my skin prickle. "He knows my name." "Yes, ma'am. Your pa Arkell is part of a priority review area." "Oh, yes, Mrs. Wallace," she said immediately, too quickly. "Mr. Lawson has been hoping to speak with you." That made my skin prickle. "He knows my name, yes, ma'am. Your parcel is part of a priority review area. I never submitted my parcel for review." There was a pause. "Not long, but long enough. I'm not sure about the intake details," she said. "I can have Mr. Lawson call you back." "No," I said. "I want to know who gave you my property information. I'm afraid I don't have access to that." "Then tell Mr. Lawson not to call me unless he has that answer." I hung up before she could smooth me down with another polite sentence. For the rest of the day, I could not settle. I dusted the living room twice. I folded laundry that had already been folded. I made tea and forgot to drink it. Every sound outside made me turn toward the window. By evening, I decided to visit Margaret Hayes. Margaret lived across the road in a white ranch house with blue shutters and a porch crowded with ferns. She opened the door before I knocked twice. "I wondered when you'd come," she said. I held up the letters. "Then you know something?" She stepped aside. "Come in, honey." Her house smelled like lemon furniture polish and cinnamon candy. She poured coffee even though it was nearly 6 o'clock and set a plate of butter cookies between us. I slid the letters across her kitchen table. She put on her reading glasses, read slowly, and pressed her lips together. She said. "That explains the men in the loafers. You said you saw Jason with 2 men near my fence?" "I did. When exactly? Thursday before last. Around 10 in the morning. I remember because I was waiting for the pharmacy delivery, and that driver always gets lost." "Did they go onto my property?" Margaret hesitated. "Margaret," she sighed. "They didn't go through your driveway. They parked near the old service path by the county road." Jason opened the gate. I felt the blood drain from my face. That gate has a chain. He had a key or a cutter. I couldn't tell from here. But they walked in. I gripped my coffee cup so tightly my fingers hurt. How long were they there? Maybe 30 minutes. One of the men had a tablet. Another had some kind of rolled-up paper. Jason pointed toward the creek, then toward your back field. The room seemed to shrink around me. That backfield was where William had taught Emily to ride a bicycle. It was where we used to set up folding chairs on the 4th of July and watch distant fireworks bloom over the tree line. It was where William scattered wildflower seeds the spring after his first heart scare because he said if he had to slow down, he wanted something pretty to watch. And Jason had walked strangers through it like a salesman showing square footage. "I asked Emily," I said. "She told me not to make it dramatic." Margaret snorted. "People say that when they've already done something dramatic and don't want consequences." I almost smiled, but my eyes were burning. "I don't understand how my daughter got here," I whispered. Margaret reached across the table and touched my hand. Sometimes Sharon people don't become cruel overnight. They become persuaded, bit by bit, one complaint at a time, one fear at a time, one person whispering, "You deserve more," until they stop seeing what they already have. I thought of Jason's careful voice, Emily's tearful accusations, Daniel's warning about old paperwork. "Do you think Daniel is involved too?" I asked. Margaret leaned back. I think Daniel has always known where money might be hiding. That was a hard truth, but not an unfair one. The next morning, I called Emily again. This time, Jason answered her phone. Good morning, Jason answered her phone. Good morning, Sharon, he said, as if nothing had happened. Put Emily on. She's busy right now. Can I help you? No. You can explain why you brought strangers onto my land. Sharon, he said, as if nothing had happened. Put Emily on. She's busy right now. Can I help you? No. You can explain why you brought strangers onto my land. Silence. Then he gave a small laugh. I think there's been a misunderstanding. You opened my back gate. I walked a boundary line. There's a difference with two men from Harrison Creek Development Group. His silence told me Margaret had been right. I received their letters, I said. They know about the creek. They know about the road access. They know details they had no business knowing. Public records exist, Sharon. Public records do not show where my husband planted wildflowers or where the old service path dips near the fence. His voice cooled. You're upset. I am past upset. I was trying to understand the property's potential, for Emily's sake. Emily does not own this property. She will someday. The way he said it made my C-hest tighten. Not if I decide otherwise. I was trying to understand the property's potential. For Emily's sake. Emily does not own this property. She will someday. The way he said it made my chest tighten. Not if I decide otherwise, I said. For the first time, Jason did not answer smoothly. You wouldn't punish your own daughter. I would protect my home from anyone who treats me like I'm already buried. He inhaled sharply. That's not fair. Neither is trespassing. Another silence. Then he said very quietly, Be careful with accusations you can't prove. I looked at the letters on my table. I can prove enough. He hung up. 10 minutes later, Emily called back. Mom, why are you attacking Jason? I closed my eyes. Is that what he told you? You accused him of trespassing? He brought buyers onto my land without permission. They weren't buyers. They were consultants. I almost laughed. Listen to yourself. Mom, Jason was trying to help us understand options. There is no us in this. That's exactly the problem. She snapped. You keep acting like this property has nothing to do with anyone else, because legally and morally, it does not. How do you know that? The question came out too fast. I sat down slowly. What did you just say? Emily was breathing hard. I said, how do you know Dad handled everything? You never looked at the paperwork. You never cared about the legal side as long as you had your garden and your memories. That hurt, because part of it was true. William had handled the taxes, the deed, the surveys, the county letters. I trusted him. In 40 years of marriage, trust had felt like a shelter, not a weakness. But Emily was using that trust as a weapon. Your father never gave me reason to doubt him, I said. I'm not saying he lied, she replied. I'm saying things may not be as simple as you think. There it was again. Old paperwork, questions, complications. Someone had been feeding her those words. Emily, I said slowly, did Jason copy any papers from this house? She did not answer. Emily, he looked at some things months ago, she said, when you asked him to help organize the file cabinet. My mouth went dry. Months ago. I remembered that day. I had been tired still sorting insurance forms and medical bills after William's death. Jason had offered to help digitize important documents. I had thanked him. I had made lemonade. I had let him sit in William's office with the file drawers open because I thought he was family. What did he copy? I asked. I don't know. Yes, you do. I don't know, Mom. But her voice broke. I stood up and walked down the hall to William's office. The room still smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. I opened the file cabinet and began pulling folders out one by one. Tax records, insurance, vehicle titles, medical bills. Then I found the property folder. The tab was slightly bent. Inside were surveys, tax receipts, and copies of older documents. At first, everything seemed ordinary. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. One old photocopy was missing. I knew it because William had written on the folder in blue ink, "Original deed copy back parcel." The note was there. The copy was not. I sat on the floor with the folder open in my lap. Emily was still on the phone, her voice small now. "Mom." I stared at the empty space in the file. "Tell Jason I said that whatever he thinks he knows, he should have asked me before touching my husband's papers. He didn't mean, and tell him I'm going to find out exactly what he sent to that company." I hung up. That evening, as rain tapped against the windows, I spread every property document I could find across the dining room table. I read until my eyes blurred. I compared dates, parcel numbers, signatures, and maps I barely understood. All I knew was this: Jason had copied something old, something important enough to make a development company believe my land was available. But he had missed one thing. William had never kept the most important papers in the file cabinet. He kept them in the safe. And the more I stared at that missing deed copy, the more I understood that the fight for my land had already begun long before that Sunday dinner. The only question was whether I still had the proof to end it. By Monday morning, I had barely slept. The rain had stopped before sunrise, leaving the yard silver with puddles and the air heavy with the smell of wet earth. I stood at the kitchen sink looking out at the back field, and I felt something I had not felt since the day William died. Not grief. Warning. There is a difference. Grief makes the world feel empty. Warning makes every ordinary thing feel like it is holding its breath. I spread the letters from Harrison Creek Development Group beside the property folder again. I kept reading Jason's words in my mind. "You should review the records, Sharon, before someone else does." He had not said that like advice. He had said it like a man who believed he already knew what the records would show. Around 9 o'clock, Emily's car pulled into my driveway. I did not go to the door right away. I watched from the window as she stepped out, clutching her purse with both hands. Jason was not with her, which should have comforted me, but it didn't. Sometimes, the messenger is harder to face than the person who sent her. When I opened the door, Emily's eyes were red. "Mom," she said, "can we talk?" I looked past her toward the road. "Where's Jason?" "At work." "Is he?" Her face tightened. "Please don't start." I stepped aside and let her in. She walked into the kitchen like a stranger visiting a house she once knew by heart. Her eyes moved over the table, the documents, the letters, the folder I had opened and closed a dozen times. When she saw the missing deed note, her lips parted slightly. "You've been looking through everything she said?" "Yes, that's probably good." I folded my arms. "Good for whom?" She set her purse on the chair, but did not sit. "Mom, Jason spoke with an attorney." I almost laughed. Of course he did. He thinks we need to settle this before it becomes a bigger problem. She swallowed. "The family." There is that word again. Emily's eyes filled with frustration. "You keep acting like everyone is attacking you, because everyone is." "No," she said louder now. "We are trying to protect what Dad left behind." I stared at my daughter. "Your father left behind a wife, Emily." "Not just land." Her face changed. Pain flashed through it, but anger quickly covered it. "That's not fair. Neither is bringing lawyers into my kitchen through your husband's mouth." She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded paper. I did not take it. What is that? A notice, she said quietly. Not a lawsuit yet, just a letter from the attorney saying there are concerns about title clarity. The floor seemed to tilt under me. Title clarity, I repeated. Emily placed the paper on the table as if it might burn her fingers. It says there may have been an error in the transfer documents from years ago. An error, according to Jason. According to records Jason reviewed, records he had no right to copy. He was helping you organize. That was not permission to build a case against me. Emily pressed her fingers to her temples. Mom, please. You have to understand something. Jason says if the old back parcel wasn't properly transferred, then it may still be considered family property. Whose family? She did not answer. Whose family, Emily? The Wallace family, she said. I felt something inside me go still. For most of my marriage, I had proudly carried that name, Wallace. It was on the mailbox, on the checks on the church donation envelopes. But that morning, hearing my daughter use it like a weapon, I realized how quickly a name can become a gate someone tries to close in your face. I am the Wallace family, I said. You married into it. The words left her mouth before she could stop them. For a moment, neither of us breathed. Emily looked horrified. Mom, I didn't mean. Yes, I said softly. You did. She began crying then. Not the angry crying from Sunday dinner, but the frightened kind. The kind that told me she knew she had crossed a line, but did not know how to get back across it. I'm scared, she whispered. I stayed where I was. Of what? That you'll cut me out. That you'll leave everything to some charity because you're mad. That Jason and I will lose the chance to build something secure. That Dad's land will just sit here until it's too late. It is not Dad's land if you have to erase me to claim it. She wiped her cheeks. I'm not trying to erase you. Then why do I feel like I'm disappearing every time you open your mouth? She sat down hard at the table. I looked at the attorney's letter, but I did not touch it. The letterhead belonged to a firm in Macon, not local. Jason had gone outside our town to find someone who did not know. William did not know me, did not know the life built into every fence post on that property. Emily, I asked carefully, what exactly does Jason think is wrong with the transfer? She hesitated. That old deed copy he found, I said. The one missing from my file. What did it say? Her eyes dropped. Tell me. He said there was a discrepancy. What kind? With the back parcel. Something about the original owner listed before Dad's name. Jason said the chain of title may not be clean. I frowned. Before William's name. She nodded. A strange chill moved through me. William had always told me the land came through his family first, then became ours after we married and paid off the remaining taxes. He never described it in great detail, and I never pressed him. In those days, I was raising a child, caring for a home, helping at church, working part-time at the library. William handled deeds and taxes because he enjoyed order, and I trusted his competence. But now, trust was being dragged into a courtroom before it had even been accused. Did the attorney say, I don't own my home? No, Emily said quickly. No one is saying that. Then what are they saying? That the land may need to be placed under a family trust until ownership is clarified? I almost smiled at how neat it was, how reasonable it sounded if you didn't know the people behind it. A trust controlled by whom? She looked away. Jason, he understands property. He understands opportunity. Emily stood again. You always do that. You make him sound like some villain. Then tell him to stop acting like one. Her mouth tightened. Mom, if you refuse mediation, Jason says we may have no choice but to file a formal claim. There it was. The threat wrapped in my daughter's voice. I leaned both hands on the table. Emily listened to me. If you drag me to court over the home where I nursed your father through heart failure, where I held his hand while hospice delivered his bed, where I washed his coffee cup the morning after he died, because I couldn't bear to see it in the sink. If you do that, something between us will break that no judge can put back together." She cried harder, but she did not withdraw the threat. Instead, she picked up the attorney's letter and pushed it closer to me. "Then prove it," she whispered. "Prove it's yours." After she left, I sat in William's office for nearly an hour. The room had changed since his death, though I had tried to keep it the same. His reading glasses still rested in the top drawer. His old Georgia Bulldogs mug sat on the shelf with pens inside it. A faded photograph of us at Myrtle Beach leaned against a stack of notebooks. In the picture, William had one arm around my waist, and I was laughing at something outside the frame. I picked up that photograph and pressed it to my chest. "What did you hide from me?" I whispered. The words hurt as soon as I said them. Because I did not want to believe William had deceived me. I wanted to believe he had protected me. But protection and secrecy can look the same from the outside, especially after the person who knew the difference is gone. Then I remembered the safe. It was in the closet behind William's winter coats, bolted low against the wall. For years, it had held passports, savings bonds, insurance papers, and a few pieces of jewelry we rarely wore. William had given me the combination before his first surgery, making me repeat it until he was satisfied. "Not because I plan on leaving," he had joked. "Because a man who loves his wife doesn't make her hunt for keys during a storm." I had not opened that safe since the week after his funeral. My knees ached as I lowered myself to the closet floor. My hands trembled as I turned the dial. Left. Right. Left. The lock clicked. Inside, everything smelled of metal and old paper. I removed a small stack of envelopes tied with a rubber band. Our life insurance documents, 2 savings bonds, and a velvet box containing William's wedding ring. Beneath those items was a large manila envelope I had never seen before. My name was written across it. Sharon. Not Mrs. Wallace. Not Sharon Wallace. Just Sharon in William's handwriting. My breath caught. I sat back on my heels and held the envelope like it was alive. It was sealed, but old enough that the glue had browned at the edges. There was no date on the front, no explanation. Only my name. For a moment, I could not open it, because I understood then that whatever was inside had been waiting for me longer than I knew. Waiting through Sunday dinners, through Emily's childhood, through William's illness, through his funeral, through the silence after everyone went home. Finally, I slid my finger beneath the flap. Inside were several folded papers, a small, hand-drawn map tax receipts, and a letter from William. My eyes went straight to the first line. "My dearest Sharon, if anyone ever makes you question whether this land is yours, please read everything in this envelope before you trust a single word they say." I covered my mouth with my hand. For the first time in days, I cried, not because I felt weak, but because somewhere, somehow, William had known a storm might come. But as I unfolded the rest of the letter, my hope faltered. The final page was missing. I sat on the closet floor with William's letter trembling in my hands, reading that first line over and over until the words blurred. "If anyone ever makes you question whether this land is yours." That sentence felt like my husband reaching through death to steady me. But the missing final page felt like another hand reaching in to take the truth away before I could hold it. For several minutes, I did nothing but breathe. The house was painfully quiet. Outside, a crow called from one of the pecan trees, and the sound made me flinch. I laid the papers carefully on the bedroom rug and forced myself to look at them one by one. There was an old hand-drawn map of the property folded into quarters. William had marked the creek line in blue ink and circled the back field in pencil. Along the edge in his small, neat handwriting, he had written, "Parcel B. Never let them confuse this with the front deed." My pulse quickened. Never let them confuse this. I unfolded another document. It was a tax receipt from decades ago, yellowed at the corners. Then another. Some were in William's name. Some were in my name. A few had names I did not recognize at all. The dates stretched back further than I expected, long before Emily was born, even before William and I had bought our first new sofa on layaway. I spread everything across the floor in a careful half circle. The more I looked, the less I understood. There were parcel numbers, deed references, county stamps, handwritten notes, and signatures that looked like ghosts from another lifetime. I recognized William's signature immediately. Firm, straight, confident. But on one older paper, there was another name written in a woman's hand. I could not make it out. The ink had faded and the fold ran right through the last name. I leaned closer, squinting. It looked like Hayes, or Haynes, or maybe something else entirely. I whispered, "Who are you?" The paper did not answer. I turned back to William's letter. There were 3 pages in my hand. The first began with love and warning. The second explained that certain things had been done years before to keep peace in both families. The third page ended in the middle of a sentence. The person who first made sure this land would be protected was not me, Sharon. It was... and then nothing. The rest was gone. I searched the envelope again, sliding my fingers along the bottom seam. Empty. I checked the safe. I lifted every bond, every folder, every envelope. I even took out the velvet box with William's wedding ring and shook it gently, as if the missing page might somehow be hiding beneath 40 years of love. Nothing. A strange anger rose inside me. Not loud, not wild, clean. Someone had taken that page. I knew it the way a woman knows when a drawer has been opened in her kitchen, the way she knows when a picture frame has been moved, when a familiar silence has changed shape, when someone has touched what they had no right to touch. I picked up the manila envelope and examined it more closely. That was when I noticed the flap. At first glance, it looked sealed and opened only by me, but near the right corner, the old glue had been torn in a rough line and pressed back down. Someone had opened this envelope before. Maybe years ago, maybe months ago. The paper had a faint crease near the top, as if someone had bent it quickly and then tried to smooth it flat. My stomach tightened. I turned the envelope over. On the back near the bottom, there was a small mark in blue ink. Not William's handwriting. William printed with narrow letters and clean spacing. This mark looked hurried, heavier, almost impatient. It was just 2 words. Check later. I stared at those words until my eyes burned. Who had written that? Not William. Not me. I thought of Jason sitting in William's office with the file cabinet open. But Jason had never known the safe combination. At least, I didn't think he had. Then I thought of Daniel. Daniel had stayed in this house during the week after William's funeral. I remembered him sleeping in the guest room because he said he did not want me alone. I remembered him making coffee one morning before I woke up. I remembered him standing near the hallway closet when I came out of the bathroom looking startled. At the time, grief had made everything hazy. Now those memories sharpened. Could Daniel have opened the safe? No. He couldn't have known the combination. Unless William had told him years ago. Unless Daniel had watched. Unless someone else had opened it while I was too broken to notice. I gathered the documents and carried them to the dining room table. I needed space. I needed light. I needed order because my heart had none. I made 3 piles, one for tax receipts, one for maps and surveys, one for letters. Then I took a notebook from the kitchen drawer and began writing dates in a line. William always believed that if you put enough facts in order, the truth would eventually stop hiding. The earliest receipt was from 1974. That surprised me. William and I had married in 1978. Why would papers connected to our land go back before our marriage? The next document was from 1976, referencing a partial transfer of a rural tract near the creek. Then a property tax notice from 1977 with a name I still could not fully read. Then suddenly, William's name appeared in later paperwork. Not first. Later. Jason's words returned to me. The original owner listed before Dad's name. Except Emily had called William Dad, and Jason had implied the name before William's might weaken my claim. But what if the opposite was true? What if the name before William's was the reason he had warned me? I reached for the old map again. In the corner was a small county stamp, faded but readable. I wrote down the reference number carefully. Then I found the same number on one of the receipts. Then again, on another folded paper. Parcel B, the back field, the creek line, the part Jason had shown the development men. I was not trained in law, but I knew enough to understand that this was the piece everyone wanted. The house and front acreage mattered, yes, but that back field with creek access privacy and road connection was what made developers hungry. Jason had not just stumbled into interest. He had identified the most valuable part and gone looking for a weakness. As the afternoon slipped away, I read William's letter again from the beginning. My dearest Sharon, if anyone ever makes you question whether this land is yours, please read everything in this envelope before you trust a single word they say. I should have told you more when I had the strength, but I kept thinking time would give me the right moment. Time is a liar when a man is afraid. You know part of the story. You know my father had dealings with land before we married. You know Daniel came to me more than once with money trouble. But what you may not know is that the most important part of this property was never mine to give anyone. I kept the records together because I knew people might twist the story after I was gone. They may say this was Wallace land. They may say you only received it through me. They may say age and grief have confused you. Do not believe them. The back parcel was protected long before our marriage certificate was signed. The person who first made sure this land would be protected was not me, Sharon. It was... I stopped again at the broken sentence. The missing name sat in the air like a locked door. I pressed the page against my chest and closed my eyes. William, I whispered, why didn't you tell me? But in the silence that followed, another question came. Who did not want me to know? That evening, I called Daniel. He answered on the 4th ring. Sharon, he said cautiously. I found William's envelope. Silence. Not confusion, silence. That told me enough to keep going. In the safe? I said. The one with my name on it. He cleared his throat. Well, William kept a lot of papers. 1 page is missing. This time, the silence grew longer. Daniel, I don't know anything about that. You didn't ask what page. He breathed into the phone, slow and uneven. You're upset, he said. If one more person tells me how I feel, instead of answering what I ask, I may scream. Sharon, old papers can stir up things best left alone. My hand tightened around the phone. What things? I'm just saying William had his reasons for protecting me, for not telling you everything. There it was, not denial, knowledge. I stood in the dining room looking down at the scattered receipts maps and the torn open envelope. Did you open this envelope, Daniel? No, the answer came too quickly again. Did you take the last page? No. Do you know who wrote, "Check later" on the back? A sharp inhale. Then he said, "Where did you see that?" My skin went cold. I had my answer. Before I could speak, Daniel lowered his voice. "Sharon, listen to me. You need to stop digging through this alone. There are things tied to that land that caused pain long before Jason was born. What pain, I can't explain it over the phone. Then come here." "No," he said quickly. "Not tonight." "Why?" Because he was afraid. I heard it. Beneath the pride, beneath the evasion, my brother was afraid. "Daniel," I said, "who owned Parcel B before William?" He did not answer. Was it someone in our family? Still nothing. Then he said softly, "Ask Margaret Hayes what she remembers." And the line went dead. I stood frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. Margaret. Why would Daniel send me to Margaret? I turned slowly toward the window. Across the road beyond the dark strip of asphalt, I could see the faint glow of her porch light through the trees. For the first time all day, the fear inside me shifted into direction. The safe had not given me the whole truth, but it had given me the next door. And the handwriting on that envelope, the missing page, Daniel's silence, and William's warning all pointed toward the same question. Who had loved me enough to give me land before I even knew it was mine? I did not go to Margaret's house that night. I wanted to. Every nerve in my body told me to cross the road, knock on her blue front door, and demand whatever truth Daniel had been too afraid to say. But I had learned something from living with William all those years when the ground is shifting beneath you. Don't run unless the house is on fire. Stand still long enough to know which way the floor is falling. So I waited until morning. I barely slept. I kept waking to the thought of Daniel's voice on the phone. Ask Margaret Hayes what she remembers. Not what she knows, what she remembers. That meant the answer was old. Older than Jason's schemes. Older than Emily's fear. Maybe even older than my marriage. At 8:30, I put William's letter, the hand-drawn map, the tax receipts, and the envelope with the strange handwriting into a canvas tote bag. I locked the house, paused on the porch, and looked out toward the back field. The morning sun spread across the wet grass in long golden strips. From where I stood, the land looked peaceful, almost innocent. But now I understood land could carry secrets the same way houses could. Under every fence line, every tax record, every family story, there might be another story buried deeper. Margaret opened the door before I reached the top step. "You talked to Daniel?" she said. I stopped. "How did you know?" She looked older than she had the day before. Not weaker, just heavier, as if something she had carried for decades had finally shifted onto her shoulders. "Because Daniel called me last night," she said. "Told me you might come. And what else did he tell you that he was sorry?" I gave a small, bitter laugh. "Daniel is always sorry right after he is cornered." Margaret stepped aside. "Come in, Sharon." Her kitchen was warm, but I felt cold all the way through. She had already made coffee. 2 mugs sat on the table. Beside them was a small metal tin with faded roses painted on the lid. I placed my tote bag on the chair. Margaret looked at it and nodded. "You found William's papers. Some of them. Page missing." My heart gave one hard beat. "You knew." She closed her eyes. I suspected. Margaret, please don't make me pull this out of you piece by piece. I am tired. I am frightened. And my daughter is being led to believe I'm some temporary widow sitting on land that never belonged to me. Margaret reached for the rose tin, but did not open it yet. Sit down, honey. I don't want coffee. Then sit down before I tell you something that may make your knees give out. I sat. For a moment, Margaret stared out the window over my shoulder toward the direction of my property. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. 44 years ago, before you married William, your mother came to this county with William's father. I froze. My mother? Yes. My mother died before Emily was born. I know. She never owned land here. Margaret looked at me gently. That's what you were told. A strange pressure built behind my eyes. My mother, Evelyn, had been a private woman, proud, careful, and tired in a way I did not understand until I became older myself. She worked as a seamstress, then later at a small department store. She never had much money. At least that was what I believed. She raised me to stretch every dollar to mend before replacing, to never trust a man who smiled too quickly. She couldn't have bought land, I said. We rented most of my childhood. Margaret nodded. That is true. But after your grandmother passed, your mother received money from a life insurance policy. Not a fortune, but enough. I shook my head. She never told me. She wasn't planning to tell many people. Why? Because of your uncle. I frowned. Uncle Ray? Margaret nodded. He believed any money your grandmother left should have gone through him first. Your mother knew if he found out she had received anything, he'd come after it. He had debts. He had a temper. And he had friends who were not above making trouble. Memories came back in flashes. My mother checking the window before opening the door. Whispered phone calls. A summer when we stayed with a cousin in Alabama and no one explained why. I had been young enough to accept silence as normal. What does that have to do with William's father? I asked. Margaret opened the rose tin. Inside were old photographs, newspaper clippings, and a folded church bulletin browned with age. She took out a black and white photograph and slid it across the table. My breath caught. A young woman stood near the steps of a county office building wearing a pale dress and holding a handbag against her chest. Beside her stood an older man in a dark suit. I recognized him from family photos. Arthur Wallace, William's father. But the woman was not someone from the Wallace family. She was my mother. Younger than I remembered her. Beautiful in a tired, guarded way. Her eyes looked straight into the camera as if daring the world to misread her. That's Mama, I whispered. Yes, Margaret said. When was this taken? June of 1976, 2 years before I married William. I stared at the photograph until the kitchen around me blurred. Why was she with Arthur Wallace? Margaret folded her hands. Arthur worked part-time helping people with land filings after he retired from the county survey office. He wasn't a lawyer, but he knew maps, parcel lines, and county clerks. Your mother needed someone she could trust to help her buy land quietly. My mother bought Parcel B. Margaret nodded slowly. The words moved through me like thunder far away. She bought the back field, most of it. The creek parcel. The part developers want now. I pressed my hands against the table. Why? Why would she buy land out here? For you? The room went silent. Margaret's eyes shone with tears. Your mother worried about you, Sharon. You were young, trusting in love. She liked William, but she had seen too many women left with nothing but memories and bills. She said a woman should have one piece of earth no one could take from her. My throat closed. All my life, I had thought my mother's love was practical because she was not openly tender. She showed love by hemming my skirts, packing extra sandwiches, warning me about men and money. I had mistaken her caution for hardness, but she had bought land for me, land I never knew had been mine. Why didn't she tell me? I asked. Margaret looked down. Because she got sick before everything was fully explained. The transfer was arranged, but there were complications with recording. Arthur promised her he would make sure it was protected. Then your Uncle Ray began sniffing around after your mother died. Arthur and William decided silence was safer until the dust settled. William knew, yes. My heart twisted. He knew before we married. I believe he learned shortly before the wedding. Arthur told him. William was furious that you hadn't been told, but Arthur convinced him that if Ray challenged anything, it might drag you into a fight while you were grieving. I looked at the photograph again. My husband let me believe that land came through him. Margaret's face softened. He let everyone else believe it. I don't think he meant to take it from you. I think he was trying to keep trouble away from you until he could explain it properly. But he never did. No, she said sadly. He never did. That truth hurt in a complicated way. It did not feel like betrayal exactly. It felt like love tangled with fear, protection tangled with control. William had left me a warning, but he had also left me confused enough for others to use that confusion against me. I pulled the envelope from my tote bag and showed Margaret the back. Do you know this handwriting? She put on her glasses and leaned closer. The moment she saw the words, "Check later," her face changed. That's Arthur's handwriting, she said. William's father. Yes. My pulse quickened. Then he opened the envelope. Or he wrote on it before sealing it, but the last page is missing. Margaret reached into the rose tin again and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I think she said, "This may be what you're looking for." I could not move. She unfolded it carefully and placed it in front of me. The paper was old, creased, and written in William's handwriting. At the top was a line that matched the broken sentence from the letter. It was Evelyn Hayes, your mother. I covered my mouth. Margaret said softly, William gave that page to me years ago. Why? He said, if anything happened to him before he told you, and if the family ever turned the land into a fight, I was to give it to you. But only when you came asking the right question. Tears fell before I could stop them. What was the right question? Margaret touched my hand. Who loved me enough to protect me before I knew I needed protecting? I looked down at the page through tears. William had written that my mother used her own inheritance to purchase the back parcel in my name, with Arthur helping arrange the filing. He wrote that the county records still held the original chain of ownership, but most family copies were incomplete. He wrote that no Wallace relative had moral claim to Parcel B. He wrote that if anyone ever claimed I only had the land because I married him, I was to go directly to the county land registry and request the archived file. Archived file, not the folder in my house, not Jason's copy, the county record. Margaret let me cry without rushing me. When I finally wiped my face, she handed me one more photograph. This one showed my mother and Arthur standing beside a young William. William looked barely 30, his hair dark, his expression serious. My mother stood between them holding a folder. On the back, in faded blue ink, someone had written, "For Sharon's future." I pressed the photograph against my chest. For days, my family had made me feel like an old woman defending dirt. But that morning, in Margaret Hayes's kitchen, I understood the truth. I was not defending dirt. I was defending my mother's sacrifice, my husband's unfinished confession, and the one piece of security a woman had quietly placed beneath my feet before she left this world. And now I knew where I had to go next. The county land registry. The Sunday after I visited Margaret, I went to church with my hands shaking inside my gloves. I carried no folder, no photographs, no letters. I wanted to. Part of me wanted to walk into that sanctuary and lay my mother's picture on the altar for everyone to see. I wanted to say, "Look at her. Look at the woman you never knew. Look at what she did for me before any of you started counting my acres like coins." But I knew better. Truth, when presented too early, can sound like desperation. And desperate women are easy for cruel people to dismiss. So I dressed carefully. I wore my navy dress, my pearl earrings, and the gray coat William bought me for our 35th anniversary. I brushed my hair until it lay smooth, placed my Bible in my purse, and drove to New Hope Baptist with my heart beating too hard against my ribs. The parking lot was already half full when I arrived. People stood in small groups near their cars, laughing, hugging, asking after grandchildren, and doctor appointments. In a small-town church is never only church. It is courtroom, family reunion, gossip exchange, and shelter, all under one roof. That morning, I was afraid it would become a courtroom for me. I saw Emily's car before I saw her. She and Jason were standing near the front steps, speaking with Mrs. Coleman from the choir. Daniel stood beside them, his hands folded in front of him, wearing the sad expression of a man who wanted people to think he was burdened by someone else's stubbornness. Jason saw me first. He smiled. That smile told me everything I needed to know. They had not come to worship. They had come to shape the story. I walked slowly across the parking lot. My knees ached, but I refused to hurry or limp. Emily looked at me, and for 1 second, I saw shame in her eyes. Then Jason touched her elbow, and her face hardened. "Good morning, Mom," she said. "Good morning, Emily." Jason nodded. "Sharon." I did not answer him. Daniel stepped forward. "Sister, we need to talk after service." "You can call me Sharon," I said. "And no, we do not." Mrs. Coleman looked from one face to another, pretending not to hear while hearing every word. Inside the sanctuary, the air smelled of wood polish, perfume, and old hymnals. I sat in my usual pew, 3rd row from the back on the left side. William had sat beside me there for years, his shoulder warm against mine, his baritone voice always a half-second behind the congregation. That morning, the empty space beside me felt enormous. Service began. The choir sang "His Eye is on the Sparrow," and I tried to sing along, but my throat closed after the first verse. Pastor Green preached about temptation inheritance and the danger of wanting what God had not assigned to your hands. Under different circumstances, I might have found comfort in it. Instead, I felt Jason's eyes on the back of my head. After the final prayer, people began gathering in the fellowship hall for coffee pound cake and announcements about the upcoming food pantry drive. I considered leaving immediately, but Margaret had told me the night before, "Don't let them chase you out of your own church, Sharon." So I stayed. I poured myself coffee I did not want and stood near the bulletin board. A few women greeted me kindly, but I noticed the hesitation in their voices. Their eyes moved over me with a question they were too polite to ask. Then I heard Jason's voice. Not loud at first, just loud enough. "We're only worried about her." I turned. He stood near the long, folding table, surrounded by Emily Daniel, Mrs. Coleman, Deacon Price, and 2 women from the Sunday school committee. His folder was in his hand again. My stomach tightened. Emily saw me watching. Her face went pale, but she did not stop him. Jason lowered his voice in a way that made people lean closer. When an older parent is grieving, sometimes they make emotional decisions. We're trying to prevent something from becoming a legal mess. A legal mess. I placed my coffee cup down before my hand could tremble. Daniel sighed. "Sharon has always been strong-willed." Strong-willed. That was what people called a woman when they did not want to admit she was right. Mrs. Coleman whispered, "Is this about William's land?" Jason nodded sadly. "Family land." Yes. My chest burned. Before I could move, Emily spoke. Mom won't even consider a family trust, she said. I had heard my daughter cry. I had heard her angry. I had heard her afraid. But I had never heard her sound so publicly certain while telling a half-truth. People turned toward me. The fellowship hall grew quieter. I walked toward them slowly. Emily, if you have something to say about me, say it to me. Her eyes filled immediately. Mom, please don't do this here. I almost laughed at the cruelty of that. They had lit the match in public and now wanted me to be ashamed of the smoke. Jason raised a calming hand. Sharon, no one is attacking you. You are standing in my church, telling people I am too emotional to manage my own home. Deacon Price cleared his throat. And maybe this is a private family matter. Jason raised a calming hand. Sharon, no one is attacking you. You are standing in my church, telling people I am too emotional to manage my own home. Deacon Price cleared his throat. Now maybe this is a private family matter. It was, I said, looking straight at Jason, until they brought it here. Daniel's mouth tightened. We brought it here because you won't listen anywhere else. To what? A plan that gives 3 people power over land they do not own. A murmur moved through the room. Jason opened the folder. That is an unfair characterization. Then close your folder. He did not. Emily stepped forward, crying now. Mom, this is exactly what I mean. You're turning everyone against us. No, Emily, I said softer than I felt. I am refusing to let you turn everyone against me. Her face crumpled, and for one painful second, I wanted to comfort her. Even then, even after everything, a mother's body remembers reaching for her child before her mind remembers why she should stop. Then Jason said, Sharon, with respect, you may not fully understand the paperwork. The room went still. There it was, the public insult wrapped in concern. I looked at the faces around me, some embarrassed, some curious, some pitying. That pity hurt worst of all. Pity is what people offer when they have already decided you are weak. I understand enough, I said. Jason smiled slightly. Do you? Because the land registry may not support what you believe? A small gasp came from someone behind me. Emily whispered, Jason, stop, but he had gone too far to turn back. He looked around the room, then back at me. We are not trying to take anything from her. We are trying to protect family property before outside buyers' taxes or unclear records create consequences none of us can undo. Outside buyers, I said. You mean the development company you invited onto my land without permission? His smile disappeared. That whisper moved faster than the first. Mrs. Coleman looked at Jason sharply. Deacon Price frowned. Daniel looked down at his shoes. Jason said, That is not accurate. Margaret's voice cut through the room from behind me. It is accurate. Everyone turned. She stood near the doorway with her cane in one hand and her purse in the other, looking small, but absolutely unafraid. I saw him, she said. 2 men. Back gate. Thursday morning. Jason's face hardened. With all respect, Mrs. Hayes, you may have misunderstood what you saw. Margaret stepped closer. Son, I am 81, not blind. A few people coughed to hide their reaction, but then Emily began sobbing, and the room shifted again. Tears can be truth, but they can also become a curtain. People looked at her, then at me, as if my refusal had caused her pain, rather than her choices. Mom, she said, Why are you doing this to me? That broke something open in me. I raised you in that house, I said, my voice trembling now. I held you through fevers. I packed your lunches. I sat in the school packed your lunches. I sat in the school office when girls were cruel to you. Your father worked overtime so you could go to college without loans. And now you stand in front of our church and ask why I won't hand my security to a man who copied papers behind my back office when girls were cruel to you. Your father worked overtime so you could go to college without loans. And now you stand in front of our church and ask why I won't hand my security to a man who copied papers behind my back. She covered her face. Jason put his arm around her and looked at everyone as if I had struck her. That was when a man's voice spoke from the corner. Mrs. Wallace. I turned. Thomas Reed stood beside the coffee urn. I knew him only slightly. He was in his early 70s, tall, neatly dressed, with silver hair and calm eyes. He had moved to our church about 6 years earlier after retiring. People said he had once been an attorney, though he never offered legal advice unless asked. May I say something, he asked? Jason answered before I could. This is a family matter. Thomas looked at him mildly. It became a community spectacle about 5 minutes ago. The room went silent. I almost smiled. Thomas walked toward me. Mrs. Wallace, have you personally reviewed the archived county records? Not yet, I said. Only papers from my home. Do you have reason to believe there are older filings not reflected in those copies? I hesitated. Jason's eyes narrowed. I thought of my mother's photograph, William's letter, Margaret's rose tin, but I did not reveal them. Yes, I said, I do. Thomas nodded. Then before anyone speaks another public word about ownership family trusts or legal claims, the proper step is to examine the county land registry records directly. Jason's mouth tightened. We already reviewed available documents. Thomas turned to him. Copies are not records. Copies are arguments. The registry is evidence. Something in the room changed. For the first time all morning, Jason looked uncertain. Thomas continued. I handled property disputes for more than 30 years before I retired. I have seen families destroy each other over incomplete paperwork, misunderstood deeds and assumptions repeated loudly enough to sound like facts. He looked at Emily, then not unkindly. And I have seen adult children mistake inheritance expectations for ownership rights. Emily lowered her head. Daniel's face flushed dark red. Jason snapped, Are you representing Sharon now? Thomas looked at me. Only if she asks. Every eye turned to me. My heart pounded. I thought of William's empty chair, my mother's picture, the missing page, the back field glowing in morning light. Then I stood straighter. Yes, I said. I'm asking. Thomas gave one firm nod. Then tomorrow morning, we go to the county land registry. Jason's expression went cold. That won't change the facts. No, Thomas said calmly. It will reveal them. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something stronger than fear move through me. Not victory, not yet, but the first steady breath of justice. The next morning, I woke before the alarm. For a few minutes, I lay still in the dark, listening to the old house settle around me. There was a time when mornings in that bedroom began with William's slow breathing beside me, the smell of coffee drifting down the hall, and his hand reaching for mine before either of us spoke. Now the bed was wide and cold, and the day ahead felt like walking into a storm with only a paper umbrella. But I got up anyway. I dressed carefully the same way I had dressed for church, not because a land registry office cared about pearls or pressed sleeves, but because I needed to remind myself I was not a confused old widow wandering into a public building begging for mercy. I was Sharon Wallace. I had lived, loved, worked, paid taxes, buried a husband, raised a daughter, and stood on that land, long before Jason Carter ever learned how to pronounce the word equity. At 8 o'clock, Thomas Reed pulled into my driveway in a dark gray sedan. He stepped out carrying a leather briefcase, wearing a navy suit, and the calm expression of a man who had seen people lie across polished tables before. "Good morning, Mrs. Wallace," he said. "Please call me Sharon." "Then you call me Thomas." I nodded, though my throat was tight. Margaret came across the road slowly with her cane holding a folder wrapped in a plastic grocery bag to protect it from the damp morning air. I made copies of everything she said. The photographs, too. Thomas looked at her with respect. "That may matter." Margaret handed the folder to me. "The originals stay with me for now. Not because I don't trust you, honey. Because I don't trust the people around you." I understood. Inside my tote bag, I had William's letter, the recovered final page, the map, the tax receipts, the attorney notice Emily had brought, and the letters from Harrison Creek Development Group. I had slept with that tote bag beside my bed, like a child clutching a blanket. Before we left, Thomas asked, "Have you told Emily we're going?" "No." "Good." Margaret nodded. Better to reach the record before the vultures reach the window. I almost smiled. We drove into town in Thomas's car. The county land registry office sat beside the courthouse, a square brick building with white columns, faded flags, and a parking lot full of pickup trucks and government sedans. I had passed it hundreds of times over the years without thinking much about it. William had gone there for tax questions, deed copies, and survey records. I had always stayed home, trusting that the business of paper was his territory, and the business of living was mine. That morning paper had become survival. Thomas parked and turned off the engine. Before we go in, he said, "I need you to understand something." I looked at him. "We may not get a clean answer immediately. Old property records can be layered, misindexed, handwritten, partially digitized, or archived under prior parcel numbers. Jason may have found one piece and built an entire claim around it. Can one piece hurt me? One piece can frighten you," he said. "The full chain tells the truth." I held those words in my chest. The full chain tells the truth. Inside the office smelled of printer toner dust and floor wax. A few people stood in line at the front counter. Behind the glass partition, clerks moved between computers' file trays and shelves of large bound books. On the wall, a sign read, "County Land Records and Deed Registry." Thomas signed us in and asked for archived records related to my address, the old parcel number from William's map, and any pre-1980 deed transfers involving Parcel B. The young clerk at the counter typed for a while, frowned, typed again, and then called over an older woman from the back. The older woman wore a burgundy cardigan and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. Her name tag said, Rachel Bennett. "How can I help you?" she asked. Thomas introduced us. "We're looking for the full historical chain on a rural property outside town. We believe some records may not be digitized." Rachel looked at the reference numbers Thomas gave her, then at me. "Wallace property." My heart skipped. "Yes," I said. "Sharon Wallace." Her expression changed, not dramatically, but enough that Thomas noticed. "You've seen this before?" he asked. Rachel tapped the paper lightly. "I've seen requests come through." "From whom?" I asked. She hesitated. "Mrs. Wallace, public records can be requested by anyone." "That wasn't my question." Rachel studied me for a moment, then lowered her voice. "A man requested partial copies several weeks ago." "Jason Carter." The room tilted just slightly. Thomas asked which records digitized deed index tax parcel summary and whatever was available under the Wallace name. "Only under Wallace," Thomas asked. Rachel nodded. That was the request. Thomas and I looked at each other. Only under Wallace. If my mother's name appeared in older filings, Jason may never have searched far enough, or he had searched selectively, choosing only what supported his story. Rachel continued, "But this old reference number you've brought is different. It may connect to a retired parcel file. You'll need to pull archive boxes. How long will that take? I asked. She gave me a kind look. Long enough for you to sit down. We sat in a waiting area with vinyl chairs and a table stacked with outdated county brochures. Thomas opened his briefcase and took notes. I held my tote bag in my lap. 20 minutes passed, then 30, then 40. At 45 minutes, the front door opened. Emily walked in first. Jason followed. Daniel came behind them. For a second, I could not breathe. Emily's eyes found mine immediately. She looked startled, then wounded, as if my being there without her were betrayal. Jason looked less surprised. That told me enough. He had expected me to come eventually. Maybe he had been watching. Maybe Daniel had told him. Maybe fear travels through guilty people faster than news. Jason approached with a thin smile. "Sharon," he said, "interesting place for a family reunion." Thomas stood. "This is not a family reunion," he said. "This is a records request." Jason's eyes moved over him. "And you are Thomas Reed, thus a retired attorney from church." "Yes." "This is not a family reunion," he said. "This is a records request." Jason's eyes moved over him. "And you are Thomas Reed, the retired attorney from church." "Yes." Jason gave a short laugh. "So now we're doing legal theater?" "No," Thomas said. "We're doing research." Emily looked at me. "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" "Because the last time you came to my house, you brought a threat from an attorney." Her face crumpled. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. He would not meet my eyes. I looked straight at him. "Did you call them?" Daniel rubbed his jaw. "I thought everyone should be present. Present for what I asked, the truth, or another attempt to manage it." Before he could answer, Rachel returned from the archive hallway, pushing a cart with 2 large boxes and one oversized bound book. Dust clung to the lids. She looked at the group now gathered near me and paused. "Mrs. Wallace?" she said carefully. "Would you prefer a private review room?" "Yes," Thomas answered before Jason could speak. Rachel led us into a small room with a rectangular table, 6 chairs, and a computer terminal against the wall. The air smelled older there, like paper that had outlived the people who signed it. Jason pulled out a chair for Emily. She sat clutching her purse. Daniel remained standing. I sat beside Thomas. Rachel placed the first box on the table and opened it. "These records go back farther than the digitized index," she said. "There are several layers of transfer, some under Wallace, some under Hayes, some cross-referenced by survey tract." At the name Hayes, Jason's expression flickered. Thomas saw it too. Rachel unfolded a large paper map and weighted the corners with small metal bars. "This is the retired survey map from 1976, she said. "Parcel B is here along the creek line." She pointed. My hands went cold. That was my backfield. Rachel opened the bound book to a marked page, then turned it toward us. "Here is the first recorded transfer related to that parcel." Thomas leaned forward. Jason leaned forward too. Emily held her breath. Rachel ran her finger down the page. "The grantee listed here is not William Wallace." The silence in that room became almost physical. Jason's eyes sharpened as if he had just been handed victory. He turned toward me with a slow, satisfied look. "You see," he said softly. "That's what I've been trying to explain." But Rachel was not finished. She looked up from the book and met my eyes. "The first name on this record," she said, "is Evelyn Hayes. My mother's name entered the room like a bell." Emily blinked. "Who?" I could barely speak. "My mother," I whispered. Jason's face changed. Daniel closed his eyes. Rachel turned another page. And according to the next filing, she continued. Evelyn Hayes transferred beneficial ownership of Parcel B to her daughter before the daughter's marriage. She looked at me again. To Sharon Elaine Hayes, later known as Sharon Wallace. No one moved. No one spoke. For the first time since my family had started calling my home family land, the official record said my name before any of theirs could reach for it. For a moment, I forgot everyone else in that room. I did not see Jason's frozen face. I did not see Emily's confusion. I did not see Daniel standing behind her, with his hand pressed over his mouth, like a man watching an old sin rise from the grave. All I saw was my mother's name, Evelyn Hayes. There it was, written in a county book, older than my daughter's marriage, older than my husband's death, older than every accusation that had been thrown at me. My mother, the woman I thought had left me, only recipes, warnings, and a few pieces of costume jewelry had left me Earth. Rachel Bennett turned the book slightly so Thomas could read it more clearly. This filing is dated June 14th, 1976, she said. The grantor transferred the creek parcel to Evelyn Hayes. Then approximately 3 months later, there is a secondary filing. She lifted another paper from the archive box. It was thinner than the rest, the edges fragile, the ink faded, but still legible. This document indicates beneficial transfer to Sharon Elaine Hayes, with recording instructions delayed pending final survey confirmation. Thomas leaned in. Was the delay ever completed? Rachel nodded. Yes. But not under the simplified index. It was cross-filed under the retired survey tract. Jason's voice cut in. That doesn't make sense. Rachel looked at him over her glasses. Old records often don't make sense until you follow all references. He pushed back his chair slightly. I reviewed the Wallace file. There was no clean transfer showing Sharon owned the back parcel before marriage. Thomas answered calmly. Because you searched the Wallace file. Jason's jaw tightened. Rachel continued. The Wallace file begins later because William Wallace was involved in tax administration and later household consolidation records. But the origin of Parcel B is not Wallace. It is Hayes. Emily turned to me slowly. Hayes, she whispered. That was Grandma Evelyn's last name. I nodded, though my throat was almost too tight to speak. Yes. Her face went pale. I thought Grandpa Wallace owned all of it first. So did I said. Daniel made a sound then. Not a word. More like a breath breaking. I looked at him. You knew. His eyes filled with shame. I knew some, he said. Some. He looked at the table. I knew William's father helped your mother with records. I didn't know everything. Thomas asked, Did you know Sharon was named in the early transfer? Daniel did not answer. That was answer enough. Emily stared at him. Uncle Daniel, he rubbed both hands over his face. Your father didn't want this dragged up. There was trouble back then. What trouble, I asked. Rachel had gone quiet, letting the family part of the record open on its own. Daniel's shoulders sagged. Uncle Ray, Mama's side, money, threats. Evelyn was trying to keep the land away from people who would bleed her dry. Arthur Wallace helped because he knew the county system. William found out later and promised he would protect it. I felt anger and grief rising together. Protect it by hiding it from me. Daniel flinched. That was William's mistake. For the first time since this began, my brother did not sound defensive. He sounded old. Thomas looked at Rachel. Are there additional documents showing why William Wallace later appears connected to Parcel B? Rachel opened another folder. Yes. Here. After Sharon Elaine Hayes married William Wallace, there are tax payment authorizations and household property references. but those do not transfer ownership from Sharon to William. They show administrative handling. Jason leaned forward. If William paid taxes on it? Rachel interrupted, polite but firm. Paying taxes does not automatically create ownership when recorded title indicates otherwise. The room went silent again. That sentence landed like a gavel. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but this time she was not crying to accuse me. She was crying because the ground beneath the story Jason had built was cracking. Rachel slid another document across the table. This is important. Thomas read first. His expression changed, not with surprise, but confirmation. What is it? I asked. He turned it toward me. There, typed in faded letters, was my maiden name again. Sharon Elaine Hayes. Beneath it, in careful legal language, the document stated that Parcel B was to remain individually held property, not marital property, unless I personally executed a transfer. I stared at the page. I never signed anything like that, I whispered. No, Thomas said gently, which means it remained yours. Jason stood. This is ridiculous. There must be later records. Rachel nodded. There are later records. His eyes lit with desperate hope. She opened the second archive box and removed several more files. Later records show William Wallace filed maintenance documents, paid taxes, updated access descriptions, and consolidated mailing addresses for notices. But none of these documents transfer ownership away from Sharon Wallace. Thomas sat back. The room felt airless. Then Rachel said the sentence that changed everything inside me. Based on the archived chain, Mrs. Wallace owned Parcel B before she married William Wallace. Emily covered her mouth. Jason's face turned hard and white. Daniel sat down slowly, as if his legs had finally given up. I looked at the document in front of me, but suddenly, I was not in that review room anymore. I was back in my childhood kitchen, watching my mother stand at the sink after a long day of work. Her feet swollen, her hair pinned carelessly, her hands rough from fabric soap and worry. I remembered her telling me, Sharon, don't ever be ashamed of needing love. Just don't confuse love with permission to lose yourself. I had not understood then. Now I did. My mother had known what the world did to women who depended entirely on someone else's kindness. She had known family could smile while measuring what you had. She had known security was not selfish. It was survival. And without ever telling me, she had planted mine beneath Georgia soil. Why didn't she tell me? I asked, though no one in that room could fully answer. Daniel spoke quietly. Because she got sick. Because Ray was threatening to challenge anything she touched. Because Arthur thought quiet records were safer than public arguments. Because William thought he had time. I closed my eyes. Time. That liar William had written about. Jason broke the silence. This still doesn't settle the full property. Thomas looked at him. It settles the parcel you attempted to show developers. Jason's mouth snapped shut. Rachel glanced down at another page. Parcel A. The house and front acreage later became jointly titled between William and Sharon Wallace, then passed fully to Sharon after William's death. Parcel B was already Sharon's separate property. Together, the current ownership records show Sharon Wallace as the controlling owner. Controlling owner, not temporary occupant, not confused widow, not woman married into someone else's land. Owner. Emily whispered, Mom. I turned to her. She looked shattered. Younger, somehow. Like the little girl who used to come to me after doing wrong, wanting comfort before confession. I didn't know, she said. I believed that part, but not knowing does not erase what people choose to do with what they think they know. Jason suddenly gathered his folder. Will need independent review, Thomas said. You are welcome to obtain it, but I suggest you be careful about any claim you've already made to third parties. Jason froze. I saw it then. A flicker of fear. Not embarrassment. Not disappointment. Fear. Thomas saw it too. "What did you sign, Mr. Carter?" he asked. Jason's eyes narrowed. "Nothing relevant." Rachel looked up. "A development company requested parcel confirmation last week. They attached a preliminary purchase memorandum." My heart beat once hard. Thomas turned fully toward Jason. "Did you represent that you had authority to negotiate this land?" Emily looked at her husband. Jason, he did not answer. Daniel muttered, "Lord have mercy." Jason buttoned his jacket with stiff hands. "This meeting is over." "No," I said. My voice surprised me. It was not loud, but everyone stopped. I stood slowly. "For weeks you have walked through my land, copied my papers, frightened my daughter, stirred up my church, and tried to make me feel like a foolish old woman who didn't understand her own life." Jason looked away. "I may not have known every page in this record," I continued, "but I knew what love felt like. I knew what my husband built with me, and now I know what my mother protected for me." Emily cried silently. I looked at her too, and I know something else. From this moment on, no one speaks for me. No one handles my papers. No one calls my home family property while treating me like an inconvenience. Thomas stood beside me. Rachel carefully placed the old documents back into protective folders. Daniel whispered, "Sharon, I'm sorry." I looked at him for a long moment. "Not yet," I said. He nodded, accepting the wound because he had helped make it. As we left the review room, I carried certified request forms for copies of the archived records. Thomas walked on one side of me, Margaret's folder held safely in my tote bag on the other. Behind me, Emily called my name once. I did not turn around, not because I did not love her. Because for the first time in my life, I understood that love did not require me to stop walking toward my own protection. By the time Thomas drove me home from the land registry, the sky had turned the color of old pewter. Neither of us spoke for the first few miles. The certified copy requests sat in my lap, stamped and dated, waiting to become official paper proof of what my heart was still trying to understand. My mother had bought the land. William had protected the records, and my family had nearly used my ignorance as a weapon against me. Thomas finally said, "Jason is in trouble." I looked out the window at the passing pine trees. "Because of the development company." "Yes, he said he signed nothing relevant." Thomas gave a dry, humorless laugh. "People usually say that when they signed something very relevant." I closed my eyes. Part of me wanted Jason exposed. Part of me wanted him to feel the fear he had placed inside my home. But another part of me thought of Emily standing in that room with her face collapsing as each record contradicted the man she had defended. A mother's justice is complicated when her child is standing close to the fire. When we pulled into my driveway, Thomas helped me carry the tote bag inside. He placed everything on the dining room table and said, "Do not speak to Jason alone. Do not sign anything. Do not give anyone original documents. And if Emily calls, decide before you answer what you are willing to discuss." "I don't know what I'm willing to discuss." "That's a decision too," he said gently. After he left, I sat alone in the house as the afternoon darkened. The rooms felt different, not lighter exactly. The truth had not erased the hurt, but the walls no longer seemed to be listening for footsteps. I made tea and let it steep too long. At 5:12 p.m., my phone rang. Emily. I stared at her name until the screen went dark. Then it rang again. Then Jason called. I did not answer. 5 minutes later, a text appeared from Emily. "Mom, please. I need to talk to you. Jason says Thomas embarrassed us publicly and misunderstood the documents." I read it once. Then again, Jason says. Those 2 words told me my daughter was still standing halfway inside his shadow. I typed back only one sentence. I will speak with you tomorrow alone. Her reply came quickly. Jason should be there. This affects both of us. I set the phone down without answering. That night, I barely ate. I carried William's letter to the porch and sat in the cool evening air, listening to crickets rise from the grass. The back field was dark beyond the line of trees, but I knew it was there. I knew now what had been hidden beneath my years of ordinary living. My mother's sacrifice. I wished I could call her. I wished I could ask why she never found a way to tell me. I wished I could ask William why protection so often came wrapped in silence. Around 9 o'clock, headlights flashed across my front windows. A car door slammed, then another. I stood slowly. Someone knocked hard enough to rattle the glass in the door. Sharon Jason called, "Open up!" My hand tightened around the phone. Mom Emily pleaded from the porch. "Please." I walked to the door but did not unlock it. "What do you want?" I asked, through the wood. Jason's voice came sharp. "No salesman polish now. We need to correct the record." The county already did that. That clerk presented an incomplete interpretation. I almost laughed. That is a long way of saying you didn't like what she found. "Open the door," he said. "No." Emily began crying. "Mom, please don't shut me out." I leaned my forehead against the door. "Emily, I told you I would speak with you tomorrow, alone." Jason cut in. "That is not happening. You are not isolating my wife so that retired church lawyer can turn you against your own family." The old fear tried to rise, but something stronger stood in front of it now. "Jason, you came onto my porch after dark to accuse me of being manipulated. Think carefully about what that looks like." Silence. Then he lowered his voice. "You don't understand the position you've put us in." Us. Yes, us. Harrison Creek expected good faith negotiations. My heart beat harder. Thomas had been right. "What did you sign?" "I signed a preliminary memorandum." "Non-binding. Then why are you on my porch after dark?" No answer. Emily whispered. "Jason, what is she talking about?" There was a pause long enough to tell me Emily did not know, to tell me Emily did not know everything. Jason said, "It was just to hold investor interest." "You negotiated land you did not own." "I negotiated possibilities." "You trespassed with consultants, copied private documents, and represented my land as an opportunity." His voice dropped into something ugly. "Your land. You didn't even know your mother's name was in the record until today." That struck me. Not because it weakened me, because it revealed him. "You're right," I said quietly. "I didn't know. And you counted on that." Emily made a small sound like she had been slapped. "Jason," she said. He ignored her. "Sharon, if you try to make this adversarial, everyone loses. Emily loses. You lose. The land value drops. The family becomes a spectacle." "You already made me a spectacle at church. That was a misunderstanding." "No, that was strategy." Another silence. Then Jason said, "If you refuse to cooperate, Harrison Creek may pursue damages." "Against whom?" He did not answer. "Against you." Jason Emily's voice trembled. "Damages." "What damages?" he snapped Emily. "Not now." I heard the break then, the first real crack between them. I unlocked the door but kept the chain fastened and opened it only a few inches. Emily stood with mascara streaked down her cheeks. Jason stood beside her, rigid with anger. Under the porch light, his face looked older than usual, thinner, desperate around the eyes. Daniel's truck was not there. At least my brother had not joined this performance. "Emily," I said, "did you know he signed anything with Harrison Creek?" She looked at Jason. "You told me it was just an inquiry." "It was," he said. I kept my eyes on my daughter. "Did you know he brought men through my back gate?" she whispered. "He said they stayed near the road. Did you know he copied my deed records months ago? He said he was helping you." Jason stepped closer. "Enough." I looked at him through the chain gap. "No, not enough. You have had enough room to speak. Now she gets to hear." He pointed a finger toward the door. "You are enjoying this." That almost made me laugh. The cruelty of selfish people is that they think accountability feels like revenge because that is how they would use it. "No," I said. "I am surviving this." Emily turned to him. "Jason, tell me exactly what you signed." His face closed. "We'll discuss it at home." "No," she said, barely audible. Then louder. "No. Tell me now." For one moment, I saw my daughter again. Not the woman who had stood against me. The child who once cried when she lied about breaking. Once cried when she lied about breaking a vase because guilt hurt her more than punishment. Jason's voice hardened. "I signed a preliminary purchase memorandum stating that family stakeholders were in the process of consolidating authority. A vase because guilt hurt her more than punishment." Jason's voice hardened. "I signed a preliminary purchase memorandum stating that family stakeholders were in the process of consolidating authority." Emily stared at him. "You said Mom had already agreed to discuss a trust." "I said we were moving toward it. She never agreed." "She would have if you had stayed firm." Emily stepped back from him. There it was. Not the whole truth, but enough. I watched my daughter understand that Jason had not merely misled her. He had used her grief, her fear, her desire for security, and her love for her father as tools in a deal. Jason saw her face and turned defensive. "I did this for us." "No," I said. "You did it before us could ask questions." His eyes snapped back to me. "You think you've won because an archive clerk found an old record? This is not over." I looked at him calmly. "No, it is not." Then I closed the door and locked it. Emily knocked once, softly. "Mom." I stood on the other side, tears in my eyes. "I will talk to you tomorrow," I said. Alone. For a long moment, I heard nothing. Then footsteps crossed the porch. A car door slammed. Another followed. The engine started, then drove away. I leaned against the door until my knees steadied. The next morning, Thomas called before breakfast. "I received a message from Rachel Bennett," he said. "Harrison Creek filed a follow-up request late yesterday. They attached Jason's memorandum. What does it say?" Thomas was quiet for a moment. "It suggests Jason represented himself, Emily, Daniel, and you as aligned family stakeholders with authority pending formal signature." I closed my eyes. He used all our names. Yes, even mine. Yes, and Daniel's. Yes. A bitter understanding settled over me. Daniel had not simply been pulled along by Jason. His name had been part of the pressure. Whether knowingly or carelessly, my brother had let himself become proof in another man's lie. Thomas continued, "We need a meeting, my office. You, Emily, Daniel, Jason if he insists, and preferably Rachel with certified records. This needs to be addressed before Jason's problem becomes something he tries to drag onto you. When tomorrow afternoon?" I looked toward the back field, where morning light had begun to touch the grass. For weeks, they had gathered around tables to pressure me. Now there would be one more table, But this time, I would not arrive empty-handed. Thomas Reed's office was smaller than I expected. It sat above an old pharmacy on Main Street, up a narrow staircase that smelled faintly of dust peppermint and floor wax. The brass nameplate on the door had been polished so many times the edges had softened. Thomas Reed, attorney at law, retired. He did not practice regularly anymore, but that afternoon, the room felt more official than any courtroom I had ever imagined. A long conference table stood in the center. On one side, Thomas had arranged certified copies from the county land registry, the old survey map tax receipts, and William's letter inside clear, protective sleeves. On the other side sat a yellow legal pad and a box of tissues. I noticed the tissues first. That told me Thomas understood this would not be only about land. I arrived 15 minutes early. Margaret came with me carrying her rose tin in a cloth tote bag. She insisted on staying unless I asked her to leave. "I watched your mother protect you once," she said. "I'm not leaving before I see someone say it out loud." Thomas placed a hand over his heart. "Mrs. Hayes, you may sit wherever you like." At 2:00, Daniel arrived. He looked smaller than I remembered, as if the truth had taken a few inches off him. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes tired. He stood near the door, holding his cap in both hands. "Sharon," he said. I looked at him. He swallowed. "I didn't sleep." "Neither did I." "I know that doesn't mean much, but—" "No," I said. "It doesn't." He nodded and sat at the far end of the table. Emily arrived next, alone. For a moment, I almost stood up. She came through the door with swollen eyes, no makeup, and her hair pulled back carelessly, like she had stopped trying to appear composed. She looked at me first, then at the documents on the table, then at Margaret. "Jason is parking," she said quietly. Thomas glanced at her. "You came together?" She shook her head. "No, he followed me." That answer changed the air. Jason entered less than a minute later, carrying the same brown leather folder that had first appeared at my Sunday dinner table. He wore a gray suit and a hard expression. There was no smile now, no concern, no polite son-in-law voice. He looked at Thomas. "Before we begin, I want to state that I am here voluntarily and without admitting fault." Thomas nodded calmly. "Noted." Jason sat beside Emily. She moved her chair 3 inches away from him. I saw it. So did he. Thomas began without drama. "We are here to review the ownership records for the Wallace property, specifically Parcel B, and to address the preliminary memorandum submitted to Harrison Creek Development Group under Jason Carter's name." Jason opened his folder. "I object to the characterization that this is my memorandum alone." Thomas looked at him. "Did you sign it?" Jason's jaw flexed. "Yes, but—" "Then we'll begin there." He slid a copy across the table. I had not seen the memorandum before. My name was on the first page. Sharon Wallace, Emily Carter, Jason Carter, Daniel Wallace. It described us as aligned family stakeholders pursuing consolidation of authority for potential transfer of development rights. I felt sick reading it. Aligned. I had been alone in my kitchen afraid of my own daughter while Jason was calling us aligned. Thomas tapped the page. "Mrs. Wallace did not authorize this. No signature was included for her," Jason said. "But her authority was represented. It was preliminary language. It was false language." Jason's eyes narrowed. Thomas turned to Daniel. "Mr. Wallace, did you authorize Jason Carter to include your name as a stakeholder?" Daniel stared at the paper. His face had gone gray. "I told him I believed the land should be handled as family property," he said. "I didn't understand he was putting my name on anything for a developer." Jason snapped. "You knew there were negotiations. I knew you were talking," Daniel said. "I did not know you were selling." I wasn't selling. Thomas slid another page forward. The memorandum includes a good faith deposit clause. Jason snapped. You knew there were negotiations. I knew you were talking, Daniel said. I did not know you were selling. I wasn't selling. Thomas slid another page forward. The memorandum includes a good faith deposit clause. Emily turned sharply toward Jason. Deposit Jason's face tightened. It was refundable. Thomas said refundable if authority could be verified. Not refundable if the representing party failed to proceed in good faith. Emily's voice trembled. Jason, how much? He did not answer. How much? She repeated. Thomas answered for him. $25,000. Emily went still. I could see the moment she understood. Not just that he had lied, but that he had risked their finances while persuading her to pressure me. You told me that money was from your commission reserve, she whispered. Jason rubbed his forehead. I was going to replace it after closing on what she asked. My mother's land. He slammed his palm on the table. I was trying to build something for us. The sound made me flinch, but Thomas did not move. Margaret's eyes hardened. Emily recoiled as if she had finally seen him clearly. Thomas said, Lower your voice. Jason leaned back, breathing hard. Then Thomas turned the folder toward the registry records. Now we review ownership. Rachel Bennett arrived at 2:20 carrying certified copies in a county envelope. She could not offer legal advice, she explained, but she could verify records and filing references. Her presence changed everything. Jason could argue with Thomas. He could dismiss Margaret. He could manipulate Emily. But Rachel was the county record walking into the room in a burgundy cardigan. Thomas asked her to summarize the chain. Rachel placed the old survey map in the center. Parcel B originated from the retired survey tract, recorded in 1976. The first relevant owner in this chain was Evelyn Hayes. A later filing transferred beneficial interest to Sharon Elaine Hayes. After Sharon's marriage to William Wallace, administrative records placed tax notices under the Wallace household, but there is no recorded transfer from Sharon to William or from Sharon to any Wallace family member. Thomas asked, Does the registry show Jason Carter as having ownership authority? No. Emily Carter, number, Daniel Wallace. Number any family stakeholder group number. Each no landed heavier than the last. Jason stared at the table. Thomas then lifted William's letter. This private letter is not the registry record, but it supports intent. William Wallace wrote that the back parcel was never his to give and that the first person who protected it was Evelyn Hayes. Emily began crying silently. I wanted to look away, but I didn't. She needed to feel what her choices had done, not as punishment, as truth. Margaret opened the rose tin and took out the photograph of my mother standing beside Arthur Wallace. That was taken outside the county office, she said. Your grandmother was there to make sure Sharon had something no one could take if life became hard. Emily reached for the photograph with shaking fingers. Grandma did this for Mom. Yes, Margaret said, before your mother even knew to ask. Emily pressed the photo to her chest and broke. I didn't know, she sobbed. Mom, I swear I didn't know. I finally spoke. You didn't know the record, I said. But you knew me. She looked up. You knew I was grieving. You knew I was alone. You knew that house was where I said goodbye to your father. And you still let Jason convince you I was the problem. Her tears fell harder. I'm sorry, she whispered. Jason exhaled angrily. This is emotional manipulation. Emily turned on him. No, Jason, that's what you did. The room went silent. For the first time, my daughter's voice did not tremble. You told me Mom was being selfish. You told me Dad would have wanted us to secure the land. You told me Uncle Daniel had a legitimate claim. You told me if I didn't push her now, she might give everything away out of grief. Jason's face flushed. Because those were real concerns. No, Emily said. They were your fears, your debts, your deal. Thomas looked at Daniel. There is also the issue of an old debt to William Wallace. Daniel closed his eyes. I turned to him. Tell the truth. His voice broke. I borrowed $40,000 from William over the years. Business failures, taxes, personal loans. He never told Sharon the full amount because he didn't want her worried. My chest tightened. Did you repay him? Daniel shook his head. Jason found out, he continued. He said if the land went into a trust, there might be a way to settle old family obligations quietly when it sold. I let myself believe that sounded fair. Fair, I whispered. He lowered his head. No. Convenient. I'm sorry. I looked at my brother and saw not a villain, but a weak man who had allowed greed and shame to make him cruel. That did not excuse him. Sometimes, weakness causes as much damage as malice. Thomas gathered the papers into one clean stack. Here is where things stand, he said. Sharon Wallace is the controlling owner of the housefront AC Riage and Parcel B. Jason Carter had no idea what was going on. Riage and Parcel B. Jason Carter had no authority to represent ownership or pending authority to Harrison Creek. Daniel Wallace has no ownership claim. Emily Carter has no current ownership claim. Jason stood abruptly. This isn't a court ruling. Thomas looked up. No, but it is enough evidence to become one. Jason went pale. I stood too. No court, I said. Everyone turned to me. Not today, I continued. I will not let this family drag my mother's gift through a courtroom unless I have no choice. Jason's shoulders loosened slightly. I looked at him. But do not mistake mercy for weakness. You will correct whatever you filed with Harrison Creek. You will remove my name from every claim. You will not enter my property again. And if one more letter comes to my house because of your deal, I will let Thomas do whatever the law allows. His relief disappeared. Emily whispered, Mom. I looked at her. And you will decide whether you want truth or comfort, because you cannot have healing while still protecting the lie. She nodded through tears. Daniel covered his face with both hands. The meeting ended without handshakes. As everyone left, Rachel paused beside me. Mrs. Wallace, she said softly, I've worked with land records for 30 years. People think ownership is just ink, but sometimes it's love trying to survive on paper. I looked down at my mother's photograph. For the first time all day, I smiled. Yes, I said, that's exactly what it is. The first consequence did not come from me. It came in a white envelope with a courier sticker on the front, delivered to Jason Carter's office 3 days after the meeting at Thomas Reed's office. I only knew because Emily called me that evening. For the first time in weeks, I answered. Mom, she said, and her voice sounded so small I had to sit down. What happened? There was a long silence. Then she whispered, Harrison Creek sent Jason a demand letter. I closed my eyes. Thomas had warned us it might happen. Still hearing it from my daughter made my chest tighten. What are they demanding? They want the deposit back, legal costs, and damages for misrepresentation. Their attorney says Jason presented himself as having authority he didn't have. I did not speak right away. Emily started crying. I know you warned him. Thomas warned him. Everybody warned him. But he kept saying it would work out. Where is Jason now? In the garage, she said. On the phone, yelling. I could hear muffled anger in the background. Not words, just the rhythm of a man whose plans had turned on him. Emily, I said carefully, are you safe? She inhaled sharply. He hasn't touched me. That wasn't my question. Another silence. I don't know, she whispered. Those 3 words scared me more than if she had said yes or no. Come here, I said. I can't. Yes, you can. Hell say I'm choosing you over him? No, Emily. You'll be choosing a quiet place to breathe. She cried harder. For years, I had prayed my daughter's marriage was better in private than it sometimes looked in public. Jason had never struck me as warm, but many people are reserved. He had never openly insulted Emily in front of me until this land dispute began, but controlling people often save their sharpest knives for rooms without witnesses. That night, she did not come. But something had shifted. The next morning, Daniel arrived at my house without calling. I saw his truck from the kitchen window and almost did not open the door. But he stood on the porch with no folder, no argument, no performance. Just an old cardboard box in his arms and shame written across his face. What is that? I asked. Everything I have from William, he said. I looked at the box, then at him. Why now? Because I should have brought it years ago. I stepped aside. Daniel entered the kitchen slowly, the way people enter hospitals and funeral homes. He placed the box on the table and removed his cap. Inside were old receipts, handwritten loan notes, a few letters from William, and 2 canceled checks. I recognized my husband's handwriting immediately. Steady, neat, unmistakable. Daniel touched the top paper with 1 finger. William helped me more than I deserved. Yes, I said. I told myself it wasn't stealing because he offered. I said nothing. But when he died, and I still owed him, I started telling myself, maybe the land was part of what I was owed too. Not directly, not in words, just in that ugly little place inside a person where excuses grow. His voice cracked. I looked at my brother and remembered us as children barefoot in summer dust, racing to the creek behind our grandmother's house. I remembered sharing biscuits, fighting over blankets, promising we would never become like relatives who fought over money after funerals. Age had carried us farther from those children than I wanted to admit. Daniel, I said, why did you side with Jason? He lowered his eyes. Because he knew my debt. He made me feel like if the land sold, I could settle my shame quietly. Maybe even get a little something besides. I didn't ask enough questions because the lie benefited me. That honesty did not heal me, but it stopped another wound from opening. Did you take the missing page from William's envelope? He shook his head. No. I swear that wasn't me. But I saw Arthur write on that envelope years ago. I knew there were things tied to Evelyn. I should have told you when William died. He shook his head. No. I swear that wasn't me. But I saw Arthur write on that envelope years ago. I knew there were things tied to Evelyn. I should have told you when William died. Why didn't you? Because if you knew the land was yours before marriage, then I knew I had no story left to hide behind. I sat down slowly. There it was. Not ignorance, not confusion, cowardice. Daniel pulled a folded paper from his shirt pocket. I wrote a statement. Thomas said it might help. It says I have no ownership claim, never had one, and that any representation otherwise was wrong. He placed it on the table. I'll sign whatever he needs me to sign. I looked at the paper, then at my brother. Do you expect forgiveness today? His eyes filled. No. Good. He nodded. But I accept the truth I said. That is where we start. He covered his face with one hand. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I said, there will be boundaries. I know. You don't come here uninvited. I understand. You don't discuss my land, my papers, or my decisions with Emily or Jason. I won't. And the debt to William? His shoulders sagged. I can't repay all of it at once. I didn't ask if you could. He looked up. You will meet with Thomas. You will put a repayment plan in writing. Not because I need the money to survive. Because you need to stop living like unpaid debts disappear when the lender dies. Daniel began to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just an old man finally too tired to defend the worst version of himself. A week earlier, I might have softened quickly. I might have patted his hand and told him family was family. But I had learned something costly. Forgiveness given too early can become permission for the same wound to return. So I let him cry. That afternoon, Thomas called to tell me Jason had retained his own attorney. Will he sue me? I asked. He would be foolish to try. Foolish hasn't stopped him yet, Thomas sighed. True, but the records are strong. Rachel's certified copies are strong. Daniel's statement will help. Harrison Creek's issue appears to be with Jason, not you. What about Emily? Unless she signs something, she may be more witness than target. More witness than target. That phrase stayed with me. Because Emily had witnessed more than she understood. She had witnessed her husband's ambition, my humiliation, Daniel's weakness, her grandmother's hidden sacrifice. And now she would have to witness herself. 2 days later, she came to my house alone. This time, I did not open the door immediately. I looked through the window first. No Jason's car, no folder, no performance, only my daughter, standing on the porch with swollen eyes and a casserole dish in her hands, as if food could become an apology, the way I once hoped dinner could soften betrayal. I opened the door. Mom, she said. Emily, I brought chicken and rice. I'm not hungry. I know. She looked down. I didn't know what else to bring. Her voice broke on the last word. For a moment, we stood there separated by the threshold, by weeks of cruelty, by years of assumptions, by every time she had chosen Jason's version of me over the mother who raised her. Finally, I stepped aside. She entered and placed the dish on the counter. The kitchen was quiet. She looked at William's empty chair and started crying. I let him use Daddy, she whispered. I kept saying Daddy would have wanted this, but I never asked what Dad actually protected. I never asked what you needed. I folded my hands together. No, I said. You didn't. She flinched, but she accepted it. Jason says you turned everyone against him. Jason did that himself. He says Harrison Creek is trying to ruin him. Jason sold them a story he had no right to sell. She nodded, tears falling. I don't know what happens to my marriage. I looked at my daughter, then really looked at her. She was not innocent, but she was wounded, and those are not the same thing. I can't tell you what to do about Jason, I know, but I can tell you this. Do not stay anywhere that requires you to betray yourself to prove loyalty. She closed her eyes. That sounds like something Grandma Evelyn would have said. A small ache moved through me. Yes, I whispered. It does. Emily stepped closer, but did not reach for me. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry I called it family land, like you were just holding it. I'm sorry I made you prove what I should have respected. I'm sorry I stood in church and let people look at you like you were greedy. Her apology entered the room slowly. Not enough to repair everything, but real enough to remain. I hear you, I said. She cried harder, maybe because I did not say it was fine. It was not fine. It would not be fine for a long time. But hearing was the first door. Before she left, I gave her one copy of the photograph of my mother outside the county office. She was protecting both of us, I said. Me directly. You through me. Emily held the photo like something sacred. What are you going to do with the land? She asked softly. I looked out the window toward the back field. For the first time, I said, I'm going to decide without fear. And that was the true collapse of their greed. Not Jason's demand letter, not Daniel's confession, not Emily's tears. It was the moment I understood that they could suffer consequences, ask forgiveness, lose money, face shame, or begin again. But none of them would ever again stand between me and what was mine. Emily came back 3 days later without food. That mattered. The first time she had brought chicken and rice because she did not know how to stand before me empty-handed. This time, she came with nothing but her purse-red eyes and a folded photograph of my mother held between both hands. I watched her from the kitchen window as she stepped out of her car. She stood in the driveway for nearly a full minute, staring toward the back field. The wind lifted her hair around her face, and for a moment she looked like the child she used to be when she had done something wrong and was trying to gather courage before coming inside. I opened the door before she knocked. "Hi, Mom," she said. "Hi, Emily. May I come in?" I stepped aside. She entered slowly, as if the house itself had the right to reject her. Her eyes moved across the kitchen, the table where Jason had spread those papers, William's empty chair, the window facing the land she had once called family property, in a way that erased me. "I almost didn't come," she said. "Why?" "Because I don't know how to apologize without asking you to make me feel better." That was the first honest thing she said that day. I put the kettle on, not because tea could fix anything, but because some conversations need something warm nearby so people do not freeze before the truth is finished. Emily sat at the table, not in William's chair. She chose the chair across from mine where she had sat as a teenager doing homework, as a young motherless bride planning her wedding as a daughter after her father's funeral. She placed the photograph of my mother on the table. "I've been looking at her every night," she said. I poured hot water into 2 mugs. "She was younger than I realized," Emily continued. "In my memory, Grandma Evelyn was always old, but she wasn't. She was probably younger than I am now when this picture was taken." "She carried age early," I said. "Hard work can do that." Emily touched the edge of the photograph. "Did she love Dad?" I sat down slowly. "Yes, she liked William, trusted him mostly, but your grandmother believed even a good man should not be a woman's only shelter." Emily lowered her head. "I used to think that sounded cold," I said. "Now I think it was one of the most loving things she ever believed." Emily looked toward the window. "Jason says you're poisoning me against him." I did not answer immediately. The old meet the mother who wanted peace at any cost would have rushed to respond. She would have said, "I'm not trying to come between you." She would have softened the truth so my daughter would not have to choose too quickly. But I was tired of soft truths becoming pillows for hard lies. "Jason is afraid of you seeing clearly," I said. Emily closed her eyes. "He says the demand letter could ruin us. It might change your finances. It might damage his career. It might expose choices he made. But ruin is not always what happens when a lie collapses. Sometimes, ruin is what was already happening while everyone pretended the house was still standing." She pressed her fingers to her mouth. "I don't know who I am without defending him," she whispered. That broke my heart in a new place. Not because I pitied her enough to forget what she did, but because I recognized the trap. Many women at some point mistake loyalty for self-erasure. We tell ourselves love means standing beside someone, even when that someone keeps moving us farther from our own conscience. You are Emily Carter, I said. Before him, you were Emily Wallace. Before that, you were my little girl who used to catch fireflies in a mason jar and cry because she didn't want them to be lonely. A sad smile trembled on her mouth. I remember that jar, she said. You always let them go before bedtime. Daddy said light belongs outside. Yes, I said, he did. We sat with that memory between us. Then Emily said, I'm sorry I used him against you. Your father? She nodded, tears spilling. I kept saying Dad would have wanted us protected, but I never asked who he was protecting first. I never thought maybe he trusted you more than he trusted anyone. I never thought maybe his silence wasn't proof that Jason was right. William made mistakes, I said. Her eyes lifted. He should have told me. Your grandfather Arthur should have told me. My mother should have found a way if she could. Secrets, even loving ones, leave cracks. And greedy people know how to put their fingers in cracks and pull. Emily cried harder. I helped him pull. Yes, I said softly. You did. She took that sentence without defending herself. That told me more than any apology. Can you forgive me? She asked. I looked at my daughter, and for a moment the answer rose instinctively. Yes, of course. Immediately. Come here. Let me hold you. Let us pretend the worst is over. But forgiveness is not pretending. I am working toward it, I said. Her face crumpled, but she nodded. That's fair. No, I said. It's honest. Fair would have been you trusting me before strangers at church had to watch me defend my own dignity. She covered her face. I reached across the table not to erase her pain, but to steady her through it, and touched her wrist. I still love you, Emily. That her wrist. I still love you, Emily. That has not changed. She sobbed, then not loudly, but from somewhere deep. But love does not mean you get my keys, my papers, my sealants, or my automatic trust. Not anymore. Has not changed. She sobbed, then not loudly, but from somewhere deep. But love does not mean you get my keys, my papers, my silence, or my automatic trust. Not anymore. I know. Do you? She nodded. I moved into the guest room last night. I went still. At your house? Yes. Was Jason angry? Yes. Did he threaten you? She looked down. Not directly. He said, if I abandon him now, he'll be responsible for everything that happens. That is a threat dressed as guilt. She wiped her cheeks. I think I know that now. What do you need? She looked surprised, as if she had expected judgment, but not a practical question. I don't know. Maybe a lawyer. Maybe a counselor. Maybe somewhere to stay if things get worse. You can stay here if you are unsafe, I said. But not to hide from decisions. This house will not become a place where you avoid the truth. She nodded again. I understand. We talked for nearly 3 hours. Not all at once. Not smoothly. There were long pauses. There were moments when Emily said something that hurt me, and moments when I said something that made her cry again. We talked about Jason's control about money, about the way he had slowly convinced her that my independence was selfish. We talked about Daniel, about William, about Grandma Evelyn. We talked about how women in families are often expected to surrender first and complain last. At one point, Emily walked to the back door and looked out. I used to think this land was just where I grew up, she said. It was. But it was more than that. Yes, it was Grandma Evelyn saying you mattered. The words struck me so hard, I had to turn away. Yes, I whispered. It was. Emily looked back at me. What are you going to do with it? For the first time, I did not feel defensive when someone asked that question. I felt the beginning of something else. Purpose, maybe. I don't want to sell it, I said. But I don't want it sitting here as a monument to a fight either. What do you mean? I walked to the window beside her. The back field stretched wide and quiet beneath the afternoon sun. The creek line shimmered behind the trees. The wildflowers William had planted still came back in patches every spring, stubborn and bright. I've been thinking about widows, I said. Women at church, women at the grocery store, women who let husbands handle every paper because trust felt simpler than learning. Women whose children mean well until money enters the room. Women who don't know what their names are on until someone tries to remove them. Emily turned to me slowly. I want part of the land to become a community garden, I said. And I want to start a small fund or workshop through the church and county library. Something to help older women understand deeds, wills, taxes, property records. Not legal advice from me, just guidance, referrals, education, a place to begin before fear takes over. Emily's eyes filled again, but differently this time. Grandma would like that. I think so. Dad would too. I nodded. Maybe that is how I forgive some of his silence. By turning what he failed to say into something other women get to hear. Emily reached for my hand, then stopped herself. That small restraint mattered. She was learning that closeness could not be grabbed simply because she wanted it. So I took her hand instead. Not fully healed, not back to before, but beginning. Before she left, she stood on the porch and looked at me with the photograph pressed to her chest. Mom, she said I don't deserve to help with your plan, but if someday you want me to, I'll show up. I looked past her toward the field my mother had protected. Someday, I said. Well, see, she accepted that too, and as she drove away, I understood something I had not understood. Before healing is not a door that swings open all at once. Sometimes it is a fence repaired one post at a time, with both people learning where the boundary belongs. Spring arrived slowly that year, as if the earth itself needed time to trust warmth again. The first wildflowers appeared near the creek line in small yellow clusters, stubborn and bright against the dark soil. I found them one morning while walking the back field with my cane in one hand and William's old sun hat on my head. For a long time, I stood there looking at them. That field had nearly become a battlefield. Instead, it was blooming. After the meeting in Thomas Reed's office, things did not heal overnight. Stories like mine do not end with one dramatic truth and a quick embrace in the doorway. Real life is slower. Real healing is quieter. It comes in signed papers, changed locks, hard conversations, empty chairs, and mornings when you wake up and realize the fear that once sat on your chest has moved a little farther away. Jason corrected his filing with Harrison Creek Development Group because Thomas gave him no room to do otherwise. The company pursued him for the deposit and fees. I did not ask for details. Emily told me later that he took out a personal loan and sold his truck to settle part of it. His reputation in local real estate suffered badly. People who had once admired his confidence began calling it recklessness. He blamed me at first, then Thomas, then Rachel Bennett, then Daniel, then Emily. That was when my daughter finally understood that a man who never owns his choices will eventually hand them to everyone around him. By early summer, Emily had moved out of their house and into a small rental near the elementary school where she worked. She did not move back home with me. I was proud of her for that. Not because I would have refused her safety, but because she needed to build a life that was not dependent on either Jason's approval or my rescue. She came by on Saturdays. At first, our visits were careful. We drank coffee. We talked about whether church groceries, anything except the deepest wound. Then little by little, the truth found its way back into the room. I looked through my own papers, she told me one morning. Bank accounts, mortgage documents, insurance, everything. And I didn't know half of what I had signed over the years. That changes now, I said. She nodded. It changes now. Daniel began his repayment plan through Thomas. The amount was not large each month, but the discipline mattered. Every check came with no note, no excuse, no request for pity. Just payment. After the third month, he asked if he could help repair the fence near the south edge of the property. I almost said no. Then I thought about boundaries. A boundary is not always a wall. Sometimes it is a gate with rules. You can come Saturday at 10, I told him. You leave by 1, and we do not discuss ownership. He agreed. He showed up with tools worked quietly, drank 1 glass of iced tea on the porch, and left without trying to turn labor into forgiveness. That was the first time I believed my brother might truly be changing. But the biggest change began with a folding table at the county library. Thomas, Rachel, Margaret, and I organized the first workshop under a simple title, Know What Your Name Is On. We expected maybe 6 women. 23 came. Widows, divorced women, married women whose husbands handled everything. Older women with sons pressuring them to simplify. Women who brought folders stuffed with papers they had never read. Women who whispered, I feel foolish, before Rachel gently told them, foolish is not asking. Brave is beginning. I stood in the back at first. I was not a lawyer. I was not a clerk. I was just a woman who had almost been pushed off the truth because I had trusted love to explain paperwork. Then Thomas asked me to speak. My hands shook as I walked to the front. I looked at those women, gray-haired, tired-eyed, proud, frightened, hopeful. And I saw pieces of myself in every face. My name is Sharon Wallace, I said. And for most of my marriage, I believed knowing I was loved was the same as knowing I was protected. The room went silent. It is not always the same. I told them enough of my story to make the lesson real, but not so much that my pain became entertainment. I told them about my mother, Evelyn Hayes, who used her own small inheritance to buy land in my name. I told them about William, who loved me but hid too much. I told them about my daughter, who let fear turn into pressure. I told them about the land registry, where a dusty old file spoke louder than everyone's assumptions. Then I said, please do not wait for a family fight to learn what belongs to you. Some women cried. Some took notes. One woman stood afterward and said, my husband died 5 years ago, and I still don't know where the deed is. Rachel walked over to her and said, let's start there. That was the moment I knew what the land was becoming. Not a prize, not an asset, not the thing my family fought over. A beginning. By fall, the backfield had changed. With help from volunteers at New Hope Baptist, the county library, and a few neighbors, we cleared a section near the old service path and built raised garden beds. We planted tomatoes, collards, beans, marigolds, basil, and sunflowers. Someone donated a rain barrel. Daniel built benches from reclaimed wood. Margaret supervised everyone from a lawn chair like a queen over a very disorganized kingdom. Emily came every Saturday morning. At first, she asked what needed doing and waited for instructions. She did not assume. She did not take charge. She simply showed up. She pulled weeds, labeled seed packets, carried water, and helped older women fill out workshop registration forms. One afternoon, I found her standing near the creek with my mother's photograph in her hand. I wish I had known her better, she said. Me too, I answered. Emily wiped her cheek. I think I'm just now learning her. I looked across the garden where women laughed over crooked tomato stakes, and Margaret scolded Daniel for planting peppers too close together. Yes, I said. Maybe we both are. Jason never came to the garden. Emily eventually filed for separation. She did not discuss every detail with me, and I did not ask for what she did not offer. That was part of our new respect. Love without control. Support without ownership. Presence without invasion. On the day we placed the wooden sign at the entrance, I stood with one hand on Emily's arm and the other holding Margaret's. The sign read, Evelyn's Garden, a place for women to grow, learn, and stand on solid ground. Thomas had suggested adding, founded by Sharon Wallace, but I refused. This started before me, I said. And it had. It started with a mother who understood danger before her daughter did, with a husband who loved imperfectly, with records preserved in dusty boxes, with betrayal that forced truth into daylight, with a land registry clerk who knew that paper can carry love when memory fails. That evening, after everyone left, I stayed alone in the garden. The sun lowered behind the pines. The beds smelled of soil and tomato leaves. The creek moved quietly beyond the trees. I sat on one of Daniel's benches and let the peace come slowly. For the first time in years, I did not feel like William's widow sitting on the remains of our life. I felt like Sharon, Evelyn's daughter, Emily's mother. A woman whose name mattered. A woman whose boundaries had become part of her healing. I looked across the field my family had tried to claim and whispered, Mama, I know now. The wind moved through the wildflowers as if answering. They had fought for the land because they thought ownership meant power. But the land taught me something better. Real ownership is not just having your name on a record. It is having the courage to stand in your own truth when everyone around you wants you to doubt it. It is knowing when to forgive and when to lock the door. It is understanding that family can be loved deeply without being allowed to control you. And sometimes, the very thing people try to take from you becomes the ground where you finally grow stronger than you ever believed you could be.